of Video Game Logic. Today's show was recorded on August the 28th, 2018. I'm your host, Gaming Psychologist, and with me, as always, the biggest nose in the business.
Caffeine Rage. Actually, I don't have that big a nose. Yeah, but you're the one that talks through it, so I imagine yours is a lot bigger schnoz than I have.
I actually do have a pretty big schnoz. Maybe that's why I'm so nasally. I've just got such a big nose. Anyways.
W.C. Fields?
Simulink. On today's show, we will, of course, be discussing the games that we've played. There has unfortunately been a mass shooting at a Florida Madden tournament. Also, another piece of sad news, a Counter-Strike Go YouTuber was killed while driving 100 miles per hour against traffic. On a happier news note, video game music is just as good of an introduction to classical music for children as a concert. Art Chief says. Microsoft announces its Xbox All Access rent-to-own consoles. We'll have our weekly community corner with a text letter and a secret segment submitted to me to Spring on Rage by one of our listeners. And we'll have our Steam weekly discovery queue. Timestamps will be in the show notes following their respective topics. And I swear to God, every time we go to record, there's a fly that comes out of nowhere. And he just flew past me while I was saying timestamps will be in the show notes. I don't know where the little bastard went, but if you hear clapping noises, that's me trying to kill this fly. Hello, Rage. How are you today?
A lot more amused now.
I mean, it happens. It's happened every week for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I kill 1 or 2 flies during the recording.
How dare you murder our studio audience? And that's W.C. Fields, by the way.
Okay. I assume this is...
in Discord. It's a link to...
Oh, man, that is a big nose. I don't think my nose is quite that big, but I do have a big nose.
But I think you would appreciate his most popular movie.
Oh, I missed him. I think. Yeah, no, there's no smushed fly on my hands. I missed him. Sorry. I saw an opportunity and I took it. And I missed. Bastard. Anyways, how are you, Rach?
I'm alright.
Well, that's good.
Just listening to you go out of your fucking mind.
Yeah. I, too, am doing well today. I was sick the back half of last week, and we postponed recording last night. We haven't said when if we were gonna try and make it up, but
yeah, we can.
With this weekend being
try to figure that out.
Yeah, with this weekend being Labor Day weekend, I have Monday off from work, so have a
we're also postponing the game club.
That's true. We are. We were both bad boys and put it off till not quite the last minute, but close. But then I got sick and I couldn't sit down and focus.
Well, the thing is,
so
I was still in a position to be able to finish. It would have been a bit of a rush. Then the game broke.
Yeah.
So I ended up spending 2 evenings trying to fix it and eventually having to hack my way out of a DLC and trigger its ending pretty much manually.
Yeah. So this is the first time in 2 years we're postponing a game club by 1 week.
Skyrim.
We postponed Skyrim?
Yes.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember I was absolutely hating it and had to go to mods.
Oh, okay. Nope. Don't remember. I mean, I do remember that you hate Skyrim. That's something we've talked about ad nauseum over the years, but I don't remember that we postponed it. But I liked Skyrim, so that didn't bother me.
I mean, Skyrim can be made
games...
palatable, but it requires a ton of mods and a ton of work.
So both games we've postponed have been Bethesda games.
Even though technically this is an Obsidian game.
Yes, but published by Bethesda. Also, wasn't it contracted out by Bethesda? So it was Obsidian. Yeah. So that still counts.
It's technically Bethesda.
And technically correct is the best form of correct. Usually.
Kinda.
Technically.
Maybe.
Anyways, so yeah, I was sick for the last week-ish. So that's actually how the whole secret segment came about, which I mentioned earlier.
Oh boy!
And we will get to that in Community Corner. So there's a little tease for later with the old secret segment,
or just fast forward.
Which you could just fast forward, but you have to wait in real time range. Yep. Anyways, I'm looking forward to talking about that, and we'll see if it turns into something a little more long running. There's potential there. Potential.
Still not sure how I feel about this.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how you're going to feel about it once we get to it either.
Oh,
not because it's anything like weird or bad, but I don't know.
Well, let's see. It's not weird or bad, so that leaves the other main group for you. Cheesy.
Okay, so it is actually weird and a little bad and a little cheesy and a little good, but it's not like I'm not like gonna show you naked
rock and roll, a little bit country.
Yeah, it's a little bit rock and roll hoochie coo. But I'm not gonna be showing you pictures of like dogs fucking or anything like that. So,
well, at least not tonight. You
don't have to worry. Yeah, not tonight. Maybe next week.
Besides, it's airplanes for you.
That is very true. And dragons. And if you want to head on over to our Discord and browse through the Star Wars RPG text chat, scroll up a little ways, you can see all of the weird things that we got into during one of the last sessions. Although it wasn't weird for me. Some of them were getting weirded out, and I was like, I mean, this is just like a normal evening for me, browsing, air quotes, weird things on the internet. I am not shocked by any of those pictures. But many of them were amusing.
Most likely.
Oh yeah, there was definitely some arousal going on. You know, some amusement. But
I had to go work the lightsaber later. Clean the blaster.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Oh hey, I just looked over
poor
there.
Katie's thermal exhaust port though.
Wink. There's no RPG night this Wednesday night, which makes me sad. I just looked over there. Apparently Cube is going to be traveling.
Well, sounds like we figured out spin tires.
Yep, we could record spin tires tomorrow. I also might wind up having to edit the podcast tomorrow night anyways. Normally I edit it at work at my downtime on Wednesday, but given that one of the other therapists' wife had to go to the hospital, he's probably not going to be there tomorrow. So I might not get any downtime. As far as I know, she's okay, by the way.
Do I even want to know?
But, no, you really don't.
Oh boy.
I don't want to know. But it was one of those, like, I was there talking to him when he got the text and then the picture. And then I was like, oh, what's that? And like reflexively. And then he showed me and it was like, oh.
And you were never able to look at ground beef the same way again.
Well, no, that doesn't bother me. That's fine. I grew up on a farm, dude. I've killed plenty of... I've butchered plenty of animals. So that's fine. You know, we're way more off topic than usual at this point. Why don't we go talk about games that we played? Right. You've got 2, I've got 4.
Well, actually I got 1. The other one's an interactive movie.
Oh. Okay. So
Tacoma,
do we want to alternate a little bit,
it off.
Or
it kind of blurs the line between video game and interactive movie. And yes, there's the whole, what is a game? And let's not get into that today. So let's just call it a game for being wrong. But still, Tacoma is an interesting thing. It's, like I said, it's blurring the line between interactive movie and a game where you're on board this ship that's been abandoned, and all the gameplay is centered around watching these holologs of the crew's days before this major event happened. Well, it was a space station, not a spaceship, but whatever, right?
Right.
The space station gets hit by debris, and you're trying to figure out what happened. And you're this lady that goes on the ship to figure it out. this is a game that feels like it should be a VR game based on how they constantly are in the first-person perspective, and a lot of the game is centered around hand gestures, and you do the whole pick up and look at things very closely, so you see all the little imperfections of the models, you know? But it's not a VR game, which is just a little puzzling to me. Especially since the opening sequence, you're signing into the station's essentially guest book, for lack of a better term. And she does the whole, to initiate your user profile, calibrate your hand motions, and you have to touch the hologram. Not where the hologram touched you, but on its hands, to be able to monitor, your how your character moves. And a lot of the gameplay actually is controlled via hand signals in what I think is sign language, just a simple spelling out sign language. I couldn't really determine if it was an actual, ASL or a different language of sign language, because there are different languages.
Yeah.
Because it's all first person, so you're seeing it reversed from how you usually see cards of letters. But this game, okay, I have one major nitpick, and this is going to be very, very nitpicky, all right? Before I really dive into things. This woman has disappearing body syndrome. No. They force you in first person, all right? And whenever something happens, you see her raise her hands and do her hand signals to be able to interact with the play log and be able to swap around and everything. But then it all disappears. Her body disappears, her hands disappear. So you're just there with a first-person camera. And once I noticed it, it irritated the fuck out of me. It's like, where are your hands? Especially whenever a lot of this is in either low gravity or zero gravity or zero G, depending on the portion of the spaceship, space station. I keep saying spaceship, but different things. Depending on the areas you are and your different gravities. So it's just a little disorienting. But the reason why I call this an interactive movie and not interactive, or not a video game, more so, or want to call it that, is just how the story is presented. The game is very short, just a couple hours long. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete it because it gives me the usual Unity error where after a while there's some sort of memory leak and it locks up my system. Still haven't figured that one out, by the way. But each area, there's holologs that whenever you enter the area, you essentially download them to your neural net or whatever. And you're able to watch a section of the story. But they kind of pad it out in a way that doesn't feel as much padding, where the play logs are a fairly large area, usually 2 or 3 rooms. And all the members of the crew may be there, or they may enter the area later during the playback. So in order to get the full story of what's going on, you have to rewatch it and follow different characters, which is very interesting. For example, one of the first ones I came across was the event where they were having a obsolescence day, which was where essentially the crew is scheduled to cycle off. And their mission is deemed obsolete. And that's also happened to be the event, when the event happened. But initially I came in and I followed the station commander and watched her start to give a log entry. Then she went in to the party and they had a little bit of talking back and forth. Then the event happened and, it kind of froze there because, the station lost power for a time or something. But then you're able to rewind and then follow, let's just call them the doctor and the the engineer. I'm not sure if that's the actual two people, but it's pretty much your typical crew where each person has their own designation, own speciality. Just like in real life, where you have your payload specialist, you have your pilots, and that sort of thing. Well, same thing here. Well, you go back and rewind, and instead of following the commander, I started listening in the kitchen where they were making the cake for the party. And they were talking about the AI essentially dictating everything for this particular party because of tradition. And then, they call in the commander, which you heard, or I heard from her point of view the first time, to come in for the party. Then go down and there's another member of the crew playing darts and throwing the darts at this person's face on the dartboard, and he's talking to the AI while the other people are talking to the AI as well, because the AI could do two different things at once. And talking about the nature of the AI's existence, and has it ever met another AI, and why they haven't allowed different AIs to interact with one another because of the fear of what may happen. It's a very interesting way to handle the story, and it requires a lot of going back and forth, and there's also a lot of almost note-taking if you want to take the entire picture of everything that's going on and all the interrelationships. I was very fascinated about how they were doing it. Granted, graphically, outside of the environment, everybody is essentially shadows, and color-coded for your convenience, of course. We're able to pretty easily follow, who's who, but they're outside of just, a picture in the database, essentially their company ID. You never really get a picture for what these people look like, which is a little disorienting, and I know it's put more than a few people off from the game, or movie, or whatever you want to call it. So I did, and it did bug me after a while. But I do understand, it's supposed to be recordings. It's not supposed to be, them actually there. So it's kind of reinforcing the whole idea of them, it being echoes of the past, essentially. And it's a lot of environmental exploration. For example, to access a particular room, you may need to find a password or a passcode. Well, a good example of this is in the opening area again, where I was trying to get into the commanding officer's lounge to get more information about what happened there, but it was locked. Well, I didn't think much of it, and I watched that interaction between the different characters, I think 3 or 4 times to get all the different people. The person throwing darts and then playing pool before being called to the party, the people sitting around the party, around the table, putting up decorations, the people in the kitchen, that sort of thing. Well, then I went to the commanding officer's quarters and found a book, and in the book there was a piece of paper. If you turn the book over, there's the passcode. So kind of, I guess this style would be the proper term for that, would it?
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of exploration to find particular clues to progress Conda. Granted, this game is very short if you know what you're doing, supposedly. But it's not so much about the story, but the atmosphere of it, which I did find very interesting. Trying to think of anything else that really kind of drove home what was going on here. There's a lot of I don't want to call it quite political intrigue, more like corporate intrigue. For example, the engineer was complaining about not having as much access as she would like for running maintenance, and having to trust a lot of it to the AI. So kind of seeing where the story's going already,
Yeah.
which felt a little bit telegraphed. It is kind of funny, the bundle that's on in Steam as well. Or did you see that?
No, I didn't, because I have
I got
Tacoma.
Yeah, I got it through Twitch Prime, so that's where I actually played it, but I don't actually own it on Steam. But I'm linking to the Steam page, and it's part of the Queer Games bundle.
Okay.
Which I just found interesting. Granted, some of these are pretty bad-looking games. Your royal gayness.
I like that.
Of course
Your
you would.
royal gayness.
But back to Tacoma. I think its biggest strength is its atmosphere. It's not creepy, which I know that sounds like a backhanded compliment, but empty space station and seeing, essentially everybody just gone and the remnants of daily life can be very unsettling and is often used in horror games. So the fact that they were able to do that but still, not make it feel creepy is a real plus for this game, It's very easy to feel unsettled. But maybe that's just because of having all the logs and be able to, see the echoes of the past and piece together what was going on. It took some of the creepiness out of it. And there's a lot of, just little human moments. One of the people in the gym walking on the treadmill, which Maya add looks really weird as just the echo of, the echo recording of him walking in place on the treadmill. Because the treadmill wouldn't be running whenever I'm seeing it. It's essentially an AR overlay with the different people. And seeing him just walking there in place, that is a little unsettling. But, it's... I think it's meant to be. But you see him talking to... I think it was his brother? Sending essentially a Skype call. And you're able to interact with different things, to be able to see, who they're talking to, and try to once again piece together the puzzle of the story of what happened, and also the interaction between them. It's a very character-driven story. I was impressed with it. It's just I had the technical issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when I talked about it a few months ago now, I also had technical issues, and I mean, you got a lot farther than I could.
Yeah, well, I just have the general Unity lockup problem. It must be a memory leak, because if I do what's suggested for the fix of the lockup, just the system lock, it actually happens a lot faster. And the fix for it is supposedly just turning off the multi-threading. So the fact that turning that off causes me to hit it faster tells me some sort of memory leak, right?
Yeah, I think so. Turning off multi-threading.
Some sort of process. Because it was running a lot slower. I don't know. It's just weird. Yeah, turning off multi-threading, by the way, cut me down to like 25 FPS on this game. So it wasn't going to be an option anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of atmospheric storytelling, a lot of intrigue, a lot of little character humanizing moments, and I think that is probably the biggest strength of this game is its atmosphere, and also the fact that it could tell a humanizing story without it feeling repetitive or annoying. There's a lot of people that were criticizing This Is the Police 2 for its dialogue. Granted, that was also an issue of them having, Kojima levels of cutscenes.
Yeah.
But I felt that, both games felt very natural in their dialogue. So I think that's, I was able to forgive that particular game a little bit more. But, yeah. Tacoma, I don't think it's worth the $20 price tag. Especially since it's 2-3 hours. maybe pushing that that 3 hour, 3.5 hour mark if you listen to everything and find all the secrets, because there's not that many things to pick up. There's not that many things to look at. And it's a space station, so it's not exactly a huge space station.
But okay. Are you wanting to swap out or alternate, or do you just want to?
If you want to.
Okay. Well, so I played a game called Earhart: Tales of Broken Wings.
They misspelled Earhart.
Did I misspell it, or did they misspell it?
No. You don't get where...
Oh, never mind. You mean Amelia Earhart, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I did have some issues typing earlier, so I was like, oh, did I misspell it? Like, the title. But anyways, this is a top-down twin-stick shooter where you play a girl who is a mechanic who wants to she's a sky fisherman, and she wants to be the one who takes down the great whale that flies by the moon. And no, I'm not making that up.
Right.
And no, I'm not taking drugs. That's the story. That's laid out in the opening cutscene. I don't know.
You take drugs a lot.
She talks about in like the opening cutscene, she talks about how that she used to live on the ground, and her father spent his whole life working so that he could get a better life for his daughter. He taught her how to be a mechanic and a pilot, and then when he died, left everything for her to be able to go live in one of the sky cities. And I've played it for a little bit. There is a story here that revolves around you going out on runs, basically. It does have that sort of roguelike...
Yeah, I'm looking at the game.
Roguelike thing.
They call it Diesel Punk Airplane Action Roguelike.
I'm not sure where the Diesel Punk comes in. I mean, it just feels very much...
Well, it's essentially updated version of steampunk.
Yeah.
Steampunk is late 1800s. Diesel Punk is early 1900s. But the same general themes.
Yeah, this feels very much like... I'm drawing a blank on it, but we did it as a game club, the airplane game, original Xbox release...
Crimson Skies?
Crimson Skies. Yeah, this feels very inspired by Crimson Skies in the art style for a lot of the planes. And like you can see some of them in the trailer or in the screenshots. But there's quite a few planes, something like these 10 or 11 planes that you can get.
Crimson Skies has some really wacky planes.
Oh no, they get wackier. And you can see the list whenever you actually load up. There's some wacky stuff in there. Just the first few planes are... air quotes, realistic.
Oh, never mind. I see one that... Well, it's still realistic, but it's... okay, that's getting a little bit more Crimson Skies.
Yeah.
It feels maybe... The one with the Sky Train?
Yeah, it feels maybe a little inspired by Crimson Skies. But anyways, you go out on these runs, and the higher you get in the sky, the more difficult the enemies become, but also the more valuable fish there are to farm. And you farm fish by either shooting them with your tow hook and reeling them into your plane, or by crashing into them without hitting them with your propeller. Because if you hit them with your propeller, they kind of explode. And then if you shoot them, they explode. Yeah. Then there's also like loot... Well, I say loot boxes, but not in the sense of like the shitty version of loot boxes, but actual boxes of loot that you reel in and can like haul back to your base to get rewards for. So... I feel icky, though, that I said that, because it's not icky. But, I mean, they're actual, like, big crates and chests of loot that you shoot with your tow hook, and then you can only have one at a time, and if you carry it back to your base, like, your run is over, and you have to start a new run. But actually getting one back to the base is, it has much higher rewards than you could spend, fishing for a while at that level. And also, the higher up you go, the more pirates that there are. There's also police forces.
Of course, scum floats.
But if, like, you can piss off the police, so you have to run back to your base anyways. I mean, it's fairly simple. I've played it a bit and have gotten 4 levels up. Like, I've been able to get 4 levels up with my current aircraft. But it's got a really weird crafting system that's not fully explained. And there's a lot of experimentation there with unlocking new parts and, like, upgraded ammo and such. But there's no tutorial for the crafting system, so there's a lot of trial and error.
Also, you tinker with it.
You do tinker with it. There's a pretty basic tutorial that teaches you how to play, but otherwise it's just sort of like, yeah, go crazy. And I assume there's more story, but I haven't found any bosses yet or anything like that. I haven't triggered any additional cutscenes. I've gotten a little bit of dialogue the couple of times that I've like researched something or upgraded my plane.
I'm assuming this was a review copy?
Yeah.
Okay, because
I got it from
because I
Keymailer.
see it in my library and I'm trying to remember. Did I buy this or?
Yeah, I got it from Keymailer about 2 weeks ago.
This is from the same dev that made First Strike Final Hour.
Yeah, it's a very good looking game. I like the art style. It's very cute. The voice acting is decent enough. I mean, it's not great, but compared to most indie games that I've played, it's head and shoulders above those. They actually have a good microphone. It doesn't sound like they're, trying to or recording their lines over an answering machine with a tape recorder or something. Like they actually have a good audio.
Hey, that's
setup
all sound like this.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds clear. There's some occasional overacting, which is kind of campy, and I like that. But otherwise, it's a cute game. It's $15 on Steam. If you really like twin stick shooters and you're looking for something new and maybe a little bit different, it might be worth that for you. Personally, this is more of like a Steam sale impulse buy kind of thing, like in the $5 or less range. But I'm not a huge fan of twin stick shooters, so it's a well put together game. I haven't noticed any bugs or crashes. I don't know how long the game is, but it certainly has some replayability, regardless of how long it actually takes to hunt the sky whale. There's lots of things in the game to unlock.
I went to their DLC for the bonus content, and it shows what the sky whale looks like. At least I'm assuming that's the sky whale. That is that looks like sky narwhal.
I'm going to look at it right now. I don't know. And where I've gotten so far, I've just seen like a silhouette of the whale. But if it's actually a narwhal, I want to, I'm going to redouble my efforts to catch that son of a bitch. Narwhal.
Now trying to decide intense hatred or intense love for narwhals.
Yes. Reddit culture has sort of ruined narwhals for me.
Okay, who fucked the narwhal?
Anyways, so yeah, I mean, it's a good game, but it's just not something that I'm super into. But hey, if you like twin stick shooters and are looking for something that's got some pretty good extended replayability, this might be a game for you. Solid, like,
Meh.
B- game. Solid B-, maybe even a B from me.
Well, considering your love of sort of crappy games, that's actually not high praise.
I mean, it's not a crappy game. It's just not something that I'm super into. It's actually a pretty good game. But, I mean, it's not, like, amazing or anything. Its gameplay is somewhat repetitive. I don't particularly go for roguelites. Roguelite.
I would call this
whatever.
more roguelite.
Or, I'm not a big fan of twin stick shooters. But
and you're not a big fan of fishing?
It's good looking. It runs well. I'm not a big fan of fishing. But, I mean, it looks good. It runs well. The gameplay is serviceable. No major problems or flaws or issues that I've been able to detect so far. So, if it's something that you're more into, it'd be a good game for you. It's just not something that I'm all that into. I'm maybe a little bit sad that they didn't really go more hardcore on the camp factor of it or the silliness of the premise. But otherwise, that would just earn it some bonus points for cheesiness. It's still a solid game. So yeah. What's your other game?
Well, my other game is another game that could be a little bit repetitive. Starhammer: The Vanguard Prophecy. This is a game I actually got interested in. I picked this up during the last Steam Winter Sale. or
Me
or the
too.
summer sale. I can't remember which now. It was a recent sale. We'll go with that. Kind of backward from probably how they intended, because I was interested in. I don't think it was Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, but the first Battlestar Galactica game they did. But because it's a licensed game, it's a bit of a premium, and I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it. So I decided to try out the previous game because it goes on sale dirt cheap. I think this was, what, sub $5? Something like that. And it has a bit of a different premise than you may expect from essentially what this is a Star Battle fleet simulator. But this isn't real time, and it's not the traditional turn-based where one side turns goes or the other. It's simultaneous turns. And it feels like a chess match. In a good way, I might add. Not, the boring, oh, here comes the usual opening. And I could definitely see why they were able to license it for Battlestar Galactica, because even the original concept in the original game, it feels like Battlestar Galactica's ship battles. Very slow lumbering ships, along with some very fast fighters. Only instead of fighting toasters, they're fighting lionfish for some reason. I'm not joking. Okay. The aliens in this, some of the big ones look like giant lionfish. And they're all nice. Biotic. They're all living ships, essentially. So that's a little weird. I have to say, I absolutely love the ship design in this game. It's chunky. It's cumbersome. It looks like spaceships that are just kind of sort of thrown together without a real care of aesthetics, because this is military tech,
Yeah.
And what can I say? I like a bit of a chunky spaceship,
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I like my Star Trek, but overall, I do think Star Wars has a better ship aesthetic for the most part. And this feels sort of like that, where it feels like a more used up universe, a more down and gritty and dirty universe. And the ship design reflects that. I didn't get too much into the story. I'm mostly toying around with the skirmish mode, trying to figure out if I want to do a series on this, and I'm not sure on that yet, because the game has a very, very limited selection of ships, and I'm a little concerned about repetitiveness, especially since battles, especially bigger ones, can take a while. My first skirmish that I did, I went in and just hit surprise me, which just generates pretty much a random, thrown together skirmish. Took me over an hour to beat. And it was...
That's a pretty good amount of time for...
And it was a pretty big battle. It was pretty much maxed out on both sides. And my analogy to chess applies here, where it's slow. It's methodical. If you try to rush it, you will screw up, and it will cost you. There is friendly fire in this game. You have to watch firing angles, especially if you're launching missiles, which essentially is, Battlestar Galactica nukes. Because if the flight paths intersect with the friendly ship, it will detonate on that ship, and it will fuck it up. There's energy balancing, trying to get a good combination of shields for defense, weapons for offense, and engine power for mobility. Increasing one decreases all the others. You have a limited amount of power. But also, which is a little bit irritating, if your shields aren't powered enough, you don't get any shield regeneration at all. And shield regeneration is pretty sluggish already. Essentially, if you don't dedicate at least 40% power to shields, they don't regenerate. You still have shields, but they don't generate. So, it feels a little bit of a wrong move to have less than 40% unless you're going like full weapons or full engines. There's directional fire. You're pretty much typical spaceship stuff. Something that is a little interesting is this looks like, just looking at the screenshots, would be flat space, 2D plane, but it's not. It's like an onion. It has layers. Your ships are able to go up and down on the different layers and are able to pass over one another because of that, which also gives your ships 6 directional shields instead of 4, because you also have essentially a top shield, essentially the top dome and the bottom dome. And
the dorsal and ventral sections.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jordy.
Carry on.
But you're also able to borrow shields from those. At least as far as I went in the campaign and in skirmish mode, the enemy doesn't seem to try to flank you on the 3D plane. So unless you purposely lower or raise yourself, you're essentially able to sink shield power and redirect the shields from that particular section that you've essentially blocked off because you dove down or rose above the enemy to funnel into other shields, which feels a little like a missed opportunity. Also, it doesn't seem like there's any ship customization. There is crew customization, which allows for bonuses on your flagship of your fleet. But all the ships are pretty much just stock. And you're also able to requisition new ships during the campaign, and they usually take about a mission or 2 to complete. And also they have this weird war score thing going on, which feels odd. It scores you on your battles based on how aggressive or how defensive you are. And it's very, very, very easy to be considered aggressive because you shot at enemies. Essentially, aggressive moves are, powering up your weapons above a certain threshold, using missiles, which missiles, they don't really ignore, but, they're essentially fired out the top of the ship and are able to travel long distances. They don't ignore arcs of fire, but their own arc of fire. Using missiles seems to be a big spike in aggressiveness. And they talk about how that particular war score will influence what campaign chapters you unlock and how different factions perceive you, which is interesting, but it feels like a little bit of a system that's out of place because, of course, you want to be aggressive a lot of times, and particularly in the early game, whenever you're not facing a lot of ships, you're just facing a handful. It feels like they're trying to force particular play styles. It's a band-aid over trying to prevent people from min-maxing, which doesn't feel right in a strategy game, particularly a very slow-paced, methodical one like this. It's sort of like how XCOM, they wanted you to rush, and always talked about how XCOM is at its best when people take risks. It's a strategy game. Did you guys miss the memo on that? Right?
Yeah. I mean, in a good strategy game, risks can pay off, but forcing people to take risks is not good.
Yeah, forcing it, and XCOM already has its own inherent risks. So forcing more risks. It's the same kind of here. Granted, it's more, prolonging the fight. I'm not sure if prolonging the fight too long will cause other issues later on, because I only did a handful of the campaign missions and then started diving into the skirmish to see what all's there. And from what I could tell, after the big encounter where you beat the lionfish for the first time and start really going after the aliens, it's just essentially 2 factions, and they only have, I would say, less than 10 ships each. So, that's where my concern about repetitiveness starts to come in. Granted, you can have different things going on. If you have an escort mission, thankfully you actually control where the escort goes. So that's nice.
Yeah, that is very nice.
Granted, the escort, also you don't have command over its energy. So it's not regenerating its shields, but you're also usually able to do, change facing, essentially. So if your shields are starting to go down on the port side, you could slowly have it turn around so it's having starboard facing. See, I can do ship directions too.
Nice.
But it just feels like a bit of a band-aid, that particular mechanic. And I would have loved to see an actual customization. Be able to requisition ships opens up the possibility for it already. But unless it's late in the campaign, or I should say later in the campaign, it just doesn't seem to be there at all. But overall, I do like the game. No voice acting whatsoever in it. I guess in the future, everybody talks via text message because it looks suspiciously like my text app. They're going back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. That's where language is heading. No vocal communication. All text. God, I hope I'm so wrong about that.
Yeah, because we definitely have faces for radio.
Absolutely. I also purchased this during the Steam sale. I've been meaning to play it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But you talking about it makes me want to go play it even more. So.
Yeah, I will say that it does have a tutorial, but it doesn't cover as much as it really should. Particularly, I had to find the button for weapon firing arcs myself. I'm not sure if I just clicked over that because it's not a vocal tutorial at all. It's just one of those. Okay, this is the command bar. This button does this. This button does this. This button does this, and it's not very engaging.
Gotcha.
So I may have just skipped over it. But yeah, there's only I think 3 ships that have special abilities, or I should say 3 special abilities for the ships. The larger, essentially capital ships, I think it's dreadnoughts in this game, are able to launch fighter drones. Basically, let's just call them battle stars.
Sure.
Because they're big, lumbering. They have a lot of firepower. They're able to launch missiles as well, but they have fighter wings, and the fighter wings are essentially remotely controlled. And if the batteries die on them, you lose them. If they get shot down, you lose them. And you usually only have 2 or 3 fighter wings. You have the missiles, like I said, which are big hits. They're AoE damage. Pretty much everything else is a directional fire and single target. So that's a big thing, having splash damage. But you're limited on firing, and they have friendly fire. And then you have countermeasures, which launches a countermeasure, essentially EMP device that will disrupt enemy projectiles. And if there's an enemy missile, it'll shoot it down, but it's a one-time thing. And that's really all the special abilities you have for your entire faction. It feels very kind of bare bones, and I'm not sure if it's worth the $20 unless you're really, really, really wanting to essentially space chess.
Yeah, it was only a couple of bucks. You said this earlier, but it was only a couple of bucks.
I can't remember exactly how much it was, and I don't want to go digging.
Yeah, it was $2 or $3.
Yeah, it's definitely worth that.
So
I'm just looking at the reviews. Yeah, it looks like there's no customization whatsoever, which feels like such a missed opportunity, particularly where you could requisition the ships,
Yeah. I love me some good ship customization too. So that makes me a little bit sad.
Yeah, I was looking at the reviews to see if anybody mentioned customization. But yeah, I do think it's worth the couple of bucks. It's worth the impulse buy sale price. And there's not many games like this. There's the Battlestar Galactica, and there's also the one set in the Warhammer 40K universe, which are this sort of turn-based battles, simultaneous turn-based battles. And that's really it that I could think of off the top of my head. There is Flotilla as well, but that's a little bit more freeform, and it's also more on the roguelite side of things, where it's a very limited time. You only have, essentially in Flotilla, you're dying, and you're going on essentially one last campaign, one last great adventure.
Yeah.
I will say that Flotilla 2 is coming out, and Jim may be interested in this one because it's VR.
There's a couple of World War II naval games that are like this. I own them, but God, it's been forever since I've played them, so I'd have to go... Is it Battlefleet, maybe?
But this was like a genre that could be expanded very easily.
Yeah, Battlefleet 2... I assume there's an original Battlefleet, but I don't know.
Battlefleet...
but
maybe
it has this...
I wonder if it's the same people, because the Warhammer game is... Battlefleet Gothic Armada.
Maybe. But yeah, Battlefleet 2, and there's
it doesn't
other
look
one as
like
well.
it. Well, it does look like they've done the same thing, where they started with one particular game and just started branching out. It looks like there's also another Warhammer Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 coming out in actually next month. Not sure if it's going to be worth a $40 game, but it's there.
Yeah. But yeah, Battlefleet 2 does this. It's World War II naval combat. It's got simultaneous turns, and you maneuver your ships the same sort of way and give them more general targeting orders for the most part.
Yeah, you are able to give some targeting orders, and you're also able to, if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty, even though it's very tedious, because once you start building up a decent-sized fleet, you're doing turn-by-turn orders. You're not giving a grand plan, you know? So,
yeah,
for things like the dreadnoughts, which are exceptionally slow, you have to tell them essentially, okay, now you move 2 inches forward. Now you move 2 more inches forward. Now start turning to the right.
Yeah.
So there is that tedium there. But if you really wanted to focus fire, and I imagine that probably on some of the harder battles, you're definitely going to have to. You can set individual weapons for individual, okay, this one wants to go for the weakest enemies. This one wants to go for the closest enemies. But also where you're going turn by turn, it's sometimes hard, particularly for fighters, which are forward-facing weapons only, and they're also very fast. I shouldn't say fighters, because it's a step up from fighters, because those are the drone from the dreadnoughts. But essentially a heavy fighter, or whatever they actually call it in game, it could be a little bit cumbersome trying to track another fighter, because enemies move so quickly and there's no indication on their range. So it's a little bit of guesstimate and a little bit of just experience. And okay, this particular enemy type is able to move this far. They're moving in this direction, so that means they'll have this arc. I would have liked to have seen. I mean, you don't have to tell me where they're going, but at least give me a general idea of their movement arcs, or the possible movement arcs, or even better, their possible movement arcs and their possible weapon fire arcs, because the enemy knows this. And in my skirmish that took an hour, there was a couple of the fish that was just sitting right in between 2 of my firing arcs on my dreadnought and just hammering it. And the dreadnought just couldn't turn fast enough to be able to try to get him into an arc. So, that's info that the AI has, but I don't, which is irritating. And part of the reason why, I'm kind of not sure I want to do something on this or not. But any questions?
I don't think so. I mean, I want to go play it.
You start to build up some very, very big fleets.
I like big fleets.
And you cannot lie.
You other captains can't deny.
Well, it's based on command points, and different ships naturally have bigger ships, more command points are used up. But I think in my skirmish, I was running 10 or 12 ships, which also adds a little bit to the tedium. Particularly, there's no ship grouping, which would have been nice. Especially, have a wing of heavy fighters or be able to move the dreadnoughts in formation if you have two, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's more quality of life at that point, really.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely... Well, maybe not this week, because I do need to play a lot of Fallout.
Yeah, you have more of the Fallout to go through than I do, don't you?
Yep, and I'm also having problems with the game being broken. So,
well, I think it was one of my mods caused an issue later down the line. But that's a discussion for next week.
Indeed. So my second game is For Honor. For Honor was free on Steam for a little bit last week.
And it was free on Uplay.
The starter edition.
Quite a while ago.
Yeah, the starter edition was free, which I was just thinking that it was going to be like the same sort of starter edition that they did with Rainbow Six Siege.
Yeah.
Which was just like a couple of multiplayer characters, and then you could start, unlocking things as you went, or spend more money on microtransactions and characters.
I've heard a lot of people say...
But it's actually...
Well, sorry, I was just going to say, I've heard a lot of people say that Rainbow Six Siege starter pack is essentially a ripoff. It's just way too much of a grind wall.
Yeah. But I was expecting that, but it's actually... The starter pack is the game. It's the base game. It includes the single-player mode, all of the multiplayer stuff that you get by default, like none of the extra characters or DLC or skins or any of that shit. But it's basically the entire original base game, which all I cared about at the time was the single-player. Like, the multiplayer was okay, but there were huge problems with the beta that they supposedly... have worked out some of them, but there's still a shitload of problems in this game with the multiplayer side. But I was like, it's free, it's got trading cards in it, and maybe the single player will be there. And it is. So, yay, I got For Honor for free. The only part I care about is the single player, which also has co-op, which I mentioned to you earlier.
Yeah, which is interesting.
You can play all of the single player missions with up to 4 of your friends, or with up to 3 of your friends. So, all the missions are full 4-player co-op. I haven't played it too much. I played through... Yeah, I watched the intro cinematic to the campaign and played through the first mission, and then I had to go, and I haven't played it since. But, I mean, it's For Honor. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it a few times on the show, so there's nothing new to report.
Well, there is one thing. Have you ever looked at the player numbers?
No.
Well,
are they back up?
Well, let's put it this way. Just before it went free to play or free to keep, let's just call it free to keep instead of free to play. Free to keep on Steam. Now, granted, this is Steam numbers, and this is also a Ubisoft game, so it has Uplay numbers as well, which we can't see. It had, let's see, I would say upper 3,000s, lower 4,000s on average.
So not completely dead, but a pretty small community.
At peak, on August 23rd, which is when it went free to keep, it hit a peak of 216,000.
Oh, that's its all-time peak.
Yeah.
According to this. I mean, hey, if you want to revive your game, give it away for free. You'll pick up some community there.
And even afterwards, they're still in the upper 20,000s.
Yeah, according to this, there's 27,540 people playing right now.
With a 24-hour peak of 53,000.
Yeah.
I mean, damn.
Yeah, I doubt I'm gonna get into the multiplayer, but I did want to play through the single player. So I'm gonna play through that. It's a fun game.
Is the co-op just the single player, or is it own thing?
I don't know, actually. I think it's the single player like campaign. I don't think it's separated out.
That's something we could do together.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it running. Really well. It started out on
I'll just have to go test
ultra.
it.
Yeah, it started out on my system like recommending ultra settings, and it was running at a pretty consistent 60. Little dips here and there. I bumped the graphics down to high, and it's staying at around 90 for me. So it runs well. It still looks gorgeous with the settings on high.
Yeah, but it's not as shiny.
Nah, fuck that.
Well, if you want to fuck it, go ahead.
But yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Whenever I finish the campaign, I suppose I'll report back on the story. I heard that it was lackluster at best, but I mean, that's okay, especially since I got the game for free. I also might do some of the 1-on-1 or the 2v2 online mode. That's about all I'd really do.
I mean, it's essentially it's a fighting game at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, because nothing matters at that point. It's the mode that's 4v4.
Is that the one that has all
sort
the
of MOBA-esque mode? Yeah, the MOBA-esque mode is the one where all the gear actually has stats.
Which is stupid.
In any of the... Yeah, in the dueling mode, it's all just cosmetic. So...
Yeah.
I might play that mode a little bit, but...
did they do the expansions like they did on Siege, where you can grind them out if you really, really wanted to?
To my knowledge, yes.
Huh.
But I'm not 100% on that. Because you could grind out all of the cosmetic gear anyways, but of course, it was faster to just buy 4,600
you don't have several
million
hundred
loot boxes.
hours to be able to dedicate to unlocking cosmetics?
No.
It does look like it is, based on the marketing blurb for the expansion. They say, pre-order now for, this is the pack. The Elite Pack for all Woon Lee heroes instantly, valued at 28,000 steel. So that sounds like the in-game currency to me.
Yeah, steel is the in-game currency.
Hey, what a steal.
Well, that's... Hey-oh. So yeah, that's For Honor. That's game 2 of 4 for me. Next on my list is some more Monster Hunter World. Just diving into that system some more and learning some of the nuances of some of the weapon groups that I hadn't spent much time with. And also just continuing to explore the world and the nooks and crannies. The game does some interesting stuff to reveal itself to you in new ways, evolving as you play through. It does a really good job of continuing to open up those really large handcrafted levels and showing you secret hidden areas or giving you new equipment to explore with. I know that's like a staple of RPGs and things, but one of the biggest issues that I think has happened in modern gaming, particularly with like Ubisoft style open world games, and with procedural generation in general, that element of discovery is greatly diminished when everything is just like climb a tower and see all the stuff, or this level was procedurally or randomly generated, so we don't know what's here. You might get lucky or you might not. And these worlds are gorgeous and there's so much stuff to find. And getting new equipment and being able to explore them in different ways and take different paths and use that to change up how you hunt monsters to get more materials from them, or more quickly, or just discovering new and interesting things. So I think I mentioned when I talked about it last time, like being able to mount a monster and like stab it repeatedly in a weak spot or something.
Yeah, going
different
Shadow of the Colossus on it.
Yeah, well, there's certain weapons that have special additional things that they can do as part of that. For example, there's one weapon that's sort of become my new favorite. It's called the Switch Axe, and it changes back and forth between a giant battle axe and a giant greatsword, both of which are much larger than your character.
And here I was hoping that was going to be a giant switchblade.
No, not this time.
Then everybody's saying, well, your character's just a pumpkin, and it turns out it's just a giant comb.
That would actually be amazing. But anyways, so the weapon has got two completely different attack styles. The axe is very slow, the sword is very fast, and when you attack with the axe, you charge up the weapon's elemental power, which you can change based on stuff that you upgrade it with or craft into it, like gems and things. So the axe builds up the elemental power, and then you can switch to the sword and discharge the elemental power and varying degrees of explosion and other special attacks. And when you're riding a monster, stabbing it repeatedly in a body part, if you're able to stay on the monster long enough, because the monsters try and throw you off. They'll bash into walls or try and grab you off the claws or whatever, and you have to sort of jump around or brace yourself so you don't get knocked off. Although if you do get knocked off, if you're fast enough and you have good aim, you can use your grappling hook to grab back onto the monster and pull yourself back onto its back. But anyways, if you're able to continue to attack one area long enough with the switch axe, you'll pull it out and discharge all of the elemental power in like this crazy explosion. Like you stab it inside the monster and whatever body part you're attacking and just go ham on that Y button to discharge all of that elemental power. And if you're able to discharge all of the elemental power in one go, you will sever that body part, which obviously either kills the monster outright if you like sever its head or something, or will greatly diminish its attack power. For example, there's a lot of monsters that have stuff on their tails, either barbs, spikes, or sort of very hardened ends, like to use like a club. There's some of them that have like poison that they can shoot out of their tail. And you do that attack on the tail and get it all the way done, and you'll sever the tail. And you can harvest additional resources from that. And also then it can't use that attack anymore.
And then it uses that as a decoy to slither away.
Well, you know, I've been tracking the monster for 20 minutes at that point. I've got all the stuff. I can just follow it pretty easily. You have these little tracking...
Fireflies.
Like firefly things. Yeah, okay, I mentioned those last time. But just, you know, the game has a pretty... It's easy to get into. It's easy to learn the basics. But when you start pouring more and more time into the various weapons and exploring and learning how to use different equipment, boy, does it get interesting. And I love games that reward that. Both the sense of exploration and that have that really reward dedication to your skills, learning new skills. And I don't think I've mastered any single weapon yet, but I've got a pretty good understanding of 3 or 4 weapon types. And so depending on what sort of monster I'm being tasked with hunting, I'll pick a more appropriate weapon type and go get them. It's very rewarding. Someone in our community or several people need to get this game, and then we can all go on hunting parties together. We can hunt some of the really big creatures.
Well, I need to upgrade my computer first.
Yeah. Maybe at Christmas time I think I said this last time too, maybe at Christmas time I'll get a couple of copies. Especially if it goes on any sort of discount during the Steam sale. I mean, I don't expect it to get super cheap, but maybe even like 25 or 30% off. Buy a couple of copies for people. Anyone who's interested in playing Monster Hunter World, please let me know. But yeah, so that's Monster Hunter World. That's about all I had to say about it. The thing that I spent playing the most this weekend, though, was Spin Tire's Mud Runner. And
but you weren't playing with me.
I sat on my couch in my office and I just streamed it from my desktop to my media PC and played it on my TV so I could cover up with my blankie. And
yeah, you had the sick.
I downloaded something like another dozen maps and then around 24 different vehicles. Got some good, some bad, some weird. And I just played a lot and explored the modding community.
Yeah, it has a very interesting modding community, doesn't it? It feels like it's broken into really 2 parts, where there's the wacky, just goofy shit, and then there's people that try to go really realistic. Some of them keep with the theme of the game, some not. Yeah,
I added a number of vehicles that weren't like big trucks. We talked about this in one of our recordings that we did. Things that we'd like to see in the next iteration of the game.
Because they announced the sequel. There's going to be more details next year.
Yeah, and one of the things, a couple of things that I said that I wanted was more variety on the low end, the 1-star and the 2-star level trucks, and then more variety of vehicles in general, like tracked vehicles, more like tractors and things like that. So I focused a lot of my mod downloads for vehicles on those things, like looking for vehicles that were, rated at 1 or 2 stars in the game. And then I tried out some different tracked vehicles, although I have an issue with some of those mods working. You have to go in and actually edit some of the files. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I don't want to go
because the actual
that
tracks,
crazy, huh?
not right now, anyways. The tracks don't show up, like the textures don't appear, so they don't drive properly, and most of them don't steer. And like they say, like if you go read down, it's like, hey, if you don't go edit these files, then these aren't going to work. And I'm like, I haven't got that far yet. I was sick this weekend. But there's a really vibrant modding community for this game.
And that's just what's on the workshop. There's more beyond that.
Yeah, but I just started with a workshop because it's easy. Just click subscribe and then it adds it and it works. A couple of my favorites. There's like a little vehicle that's themed as a drone. It's a 1-star vehicle. It can carry like a small amount of fuel, like 1 garage point or a small amount of repair points, but it's battery powered. So you don't have to fuel it up. Like the only way to fuel it up is to drive back to the garage, but it doesn't have any weight from fuel. So it's got a lot of low end torque as well, because most electric motors have a ton of torque, but not a lot of high end power. So
really
it's
good
actually
for mud.
really good for mud in a game about mudding. So that's pretty cool. Downloaded a couple of different versions of Jeeps.
Yeah, there's one. I can't remember what the name of it is, and I'm not sure if it's updated for the last DLC or what's called DLC nowadays. It used to be just called patches. It was an inloader. That basically was just the loading crane with a little bit of modification, so it actually looks like its own little vehicle. But the downside of it was that it didn't go well on mud, so it either had to be towed, or you had to be very careful, or it could only be used, in loading areas that are near garages.
Yeah. Let's see, what else did I get that was pretty cool? I got a tractor, an actual 4-wheel drive tractor. It's a 2-star rated vehicle. Mm-hmm. Incredibly useful. Slow, but incredibly useful. It's got a log, either a front end loader for logs or a sort of crane loader that's hooked up to the back. You can put a dozer blade on it, and it can push rocks and debris and stuff around, and you can clear out paths. And help get push trucks out of places that are stuck. Now that's nifty. I downloaded the Warthog from Halo. That thing is, the Puma. That thing is ridiculously broken, but in a fun way. It can drive ridiculously fast. It's got like 30,000 health. Because it drives so fast that over anything that isn't pretty much flat ground, it takes damage. So it's got a lot of health to soak that up. And it's hilarious to hook trailers up to it because it breaks the physics on the trailers because nothing's designed to go that fast in the game. So they like fly all over the place. And it's got authentic Warthog flipping action. So when it flips over, and the engine stalls, whenever you start the engine, like it flips over like how the Master Chief flips it in Halo. So it's almost impossible to get it stuck.
Whoa, you're
because
going
even if you
really
crash
robotic.
Well, my thing turned red. But even if you crash it, it'll just flip right back over. You have to sort of wedge it between trees or something in order for it to get completely killed.
Yeah, I'm trying to find what the loader is because that'd be fun, but I'm not finding it immediately. I found tractors that one has the ability to put an inloader on it. So,
yeah, probably though my favorite is like a cute little Volkswagen something or other, like a very tiny Volkswagen van. It's just it's cute. It comes in like cute colors like teal and purple. It's actually pretty good for exploring. It's useless for anything else. It can actually carry like a small trailer for garage parts and a tiny amount of fuel and repair points. But I mean, it's basically useless for anything except exploring. But it's so tiny, it can go anywhere between any trees. So it's cute. It's fun. Makes me happy.
I haven't toyed around much with the cars, but there's armored personnel carriers. There's Hummers. Oh, there it is. Go. Are you on the workshop?
I can be.
Unfortunately, the entire thing is in Russian, but I'm going to subscribe to that. It's the EO 3323.
EO. Oh yeah, I have that already. I'm subscribed to that. That thing is extremely slow.
Yeah. Like I said,
it is an excellent loader.
Because, it has the 360 rotation on it, and which is kind of a downside if you're trying to drive it after loading something, because you have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll be in the next map. Agreed?
Yeah, we can use that. I played around with it a little bit. But yeah, I just have messed around with a bunch of mod stuff.
And letting your son wreck cars.
Yeah, I let him play for a little bit yesterday. I actually let him drive. Normally he just like operates the headlights and the horn and tells me what to do. But last night he was like, I want to drive, Daddy. I'm like, okay. So I picked Road Trip, which has the most points available for like vehicle points, so that he could basically pick whatever he wanted. And he picked five different trucks.
That's just a map form.
Sure.
I'm gonna have to just send you the link because this is in probably Russian. I mean, it's Cyrillic letters, so yeah, my choices of languages is very limited on what it could be, right?
Yeah.
It is this. It's listed as a test map.
Okay. Pulling it up right now. Oh, hey. That's easy. Cute looking. But yeah, within like 15 minutes, my son had crashed all 5 trucks.
To be fair, Road Trip isn't a joke.
No, Road Trip is no joke.
Yeah, poor
kid.
That
map is messed up.
In a good way.
Yeah. But, yeah, so those are all the games I played this week. And that went for a long time.
Yes, it did. We're at an hour 20.
We are. I need to very quickly take a break. I'm out of cough drops. My throat's a little scratchy.
All right.
So, before we get on to some deep news topics, I'm going to go grab a handful of cough drops.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Let's go talk about this weekend's sad news topics. The first one, mass shooting at a Florida Madden tournament. So,
I was not looking forward to talking about this. But
nope,
it feels remiss
here
if
we go
don't.
Again. Yeah. Yeah, we can't bury our head in the sand for things like this. We have to confront it, deal with it, and do our best to move on.
What we're just going to say, it's a bunch of crisis actors. Sorry.
So, oh man, I'm so tempted to go talk briefly. So did you see where that Alex Jones was seen to be viewing trans?
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
On his phone?
I found it hilarious. But
yeah,
honestly, not unsurprising. Just because there's a bell curve. Once you're against something for so much, I start to suspect that they're in the closet for that particular thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is some actual research that backs that up. People who are
homophobic
not
or
always,
transphobic.
But the more someone is vehemently like hates something or is against something, the more they obsess over it to the point where it oftentimes becomes a closeted fetish. That's a real life phenomenon that has repeated itself over and over again.
Would that be bad PC ports for me?
You have a closeted fetish. Yeah, absolutely. You have a closeted fetish for bad PC ports.
Oh yeah, that low FPS. Oh, that clumsy UI. Oh.
But see, then you feel dirty afterwards because you're ashamed for liking things like that. But yeah, that's an observable real world phenomenon that has played out a number of times, particularly in recent years, where it's much easier for people to access those sorts of things.
And it's very easy to leak info. Because for Alex Jones, it was him putting out a promo for his new streaming site because he's been pretty much banned everywhere else, which I do find is amusing. And not without warrant. I mean, if he was being targeted because he's an asshole, that's one thing. But him calling for violence and spewing hate speech, that's against the terms of service. You're gone, motherfucker.
Yep.
Granted, not sure how the president gets by, but
because he's the president.
Oh, don't worry. He's going to regulate Google and Twitter. Because, he's for regulation now. Or did you see that one?
Yeah. Nope, I saw that too. I tweeted about that. I was like, my first response to this is, oh, honey.
Bless your little heart.
My second response is, God, you're stupid. Like, good luck taking on Google. One of the only companies in the world that actually could give the government, any government, a run for their money. So, good luck with that. The thing that I'm talking about, though, specifically with reference to in psychology, with how someone will take sort of so much energy devoted to a thing and then start acting out on that thing, is called reaction formation. Just gonna throw that in there.
Almost like you have a master's in this or something.
It's almost like I'm a practicing therapist and have dealt with things like this before in people.
Wait, therapist? I thought you were the rapist.
Well, you can't spell therapist without rapist.
The game is
Anyways, now that we've essentially completely derailed the start of our topic, and
try to lighten the mood. I think that's kind of our coping mechanism. Hey, it's almost like I've hung out with a therapist way too much.
Indeed.
Is that we try to lighten the mood and lighten the blow. Because I saw this and just shook my head.
Yeah, I think that did I actually show this one to you? Or did you see it around the time?
I think I saw it around the time. But I was the one that showed you our next news topic, which we're not jumping to yet because we still have things to talk about in this one.
Yes, but unfortunately there was a shooting at a Madden tournament.
Reportedly the shooter was a contestant, and there's some mixed info on if he lost or if something else happened. I've seen a couple of reports on different things, and this has been kind of dominating national news. And
yeah, the most common thing I've seen was that he, when he lost, he got upset. And he had a concealed firearm on him, which he pulled and started shooting other contestants or other competitors.
Yeah, which, anger management. I've realized, my moniker online makes that a little bit funny, but still.
What was the final casualty total?
I've only seen 2 dead, both of them competitors in the event. I haven't seen any updates on fatalities, which has... I'm trying to find...
okay, here we go. On the gamesindustry.biz article, 13 victims, 3 deceased,
which includes
10 injured.
The suspect, the shooter.
Yeah. So 2 victims, and then the shooter shot himself. And then that would leave 10 other people who were wounded.
Yeah, a couple of which was injured due to the stampede. No, unsurprisingly, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was somewhere and someone started shooting, I mean, they teach you whenever you go to concealed carry courses, like, don't be a hero. It's like a last ditch thing, and if you can reasonably run, then that's a better course of action than to pull your gun also and start shooting. So
wait, you're talking about good guys with guns shouldn't be firing randomly into crowds?
Yeah. Surprisingly, that's what they teach you when you go to take your concealed carry training course that you're required to in most states.
I would say most same states.
Yeah. But yeah, they teach you, at least the instructor that I had, and I think any good instructor would say, don't get the hero complex. Don't add to the chaos.
Yeah, because if you're shooting and the police show up, they have no idea that you're the good guy with the gun, to borrow the political phrase nowadays, and you'll get your ass shot.
Yeah.
On top of adding to the chaos and potentially adding more victims. That's why the whole, all it takes is one good guy with a gun there to stop it. Just loses all, arguments to me. Is that, okay, well, have you ever been in that type of situation? Granted, I haven't, so I'm speaking hypothetically on my part, but I think it would be a little chaotic. And there's no way it's going to be like at the firing range, Yeah. And that's on top of the psychological thing of you're shooting another person. And I think at least a good part of the population would have at least some pause on that, even if they're firing randomly into a crowd. That person, I should say.
Yeah. I've never done a course like not an obstacle course, but the training courses that they walk you through, and you go through rooms and shoot targets and all that stuff. But I have done a couple more advanced training courses where they get your heart rate raised and have you shoot from awkward positions and things to try and simulate more real world scenarios. And even doing that compared to just standing on a firing range and just practicing marksmanship is a whole different ball game and really difficult. So I never want to be in that situation. I never, ever, ever want to be in that situation. And even if I was, I probably would run. If at all possible. Because, I don't want to make it worse. I carry a weapon in a last-ditch scenario. And I hope I never have to use it for anything other than target practice or the occasional time that my dad convinces me to go hunting with him. Although if I go hunting, I'm not going to take my pistol for that.
What, you're not going to give it to the deer to give him a sporting chance?
Here you go. Have a fighting chance. Although deer don't have thumbs, so I don't know how he's going to work.
You're just hanging on the
trigger,
antler.
But he'll figure it out. Deer are smart and pesky little creatures.
And delicious.
They are delicious. So we pretty much immediately went to gun-related stuff.
I think that's the logical place to go with this, because this is somebody that I think it's fairly obvious that they had some sort of issue. If their first thought on losing is to shoot up the place.
Yeah.
I think this really goes back to, just the lack of mental health care in the U.S. And I can't see you, but I can imagine your eyes just lit up on that one.
I just kind of shook my head.
Where not only seeking mental health is demonized, but it's just not available for a lot of people in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting better in the States, and honestly, compared to some other places in the world, the United States is a shining example for mental health. But, the gap has really closed in the last 5 years or so with other places in the world. Them sort of catching up and in a lot of ways surpassing U.S. mental health. The United States used to be a world leader in mental health, both research and application, and a lot of other European countries are catching up, and in some cases passing United States mental health. A lot of it, honestly, the biggest problem, which we're not going to get into here, is the United States healthcare system in general, which really fucks over mental health in a lot of ways.
What you're saying, healthcare is complex? Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew health insurance could be so complex? I feel like I'm baiting you more than usual tonight.
We're getting a lot of funding right now because of the air quotes opiate crisis, which we are trying to turn into programs to help people who need it more than air quotes people suffering from the opiate crisis.
Yeah, which I could talk a bit about that. Granted, not firsthand. But my state is one of the worst with the opiate crisis, and well, I can't really use sarcasm quotes on that one because there was a town in the southern part of West Virginia that served out several million doses of different opioids. Granted, typically a town like that, it's not serving just the town, but it's serving the surrounding area. But a lot of it stems from the fact that especially Oxycontin was marketed to doctors as being less likely to be abused because it's a time-release drug. Never minding the fact that if you crush the pill and snort it or smoke it or whatever, imbibe it a different way than they intended. It bypasses all the mechanisms that they built into the drug, and it was a higher dosage, which makes it a lot more addictive.
Yeah.
But that's, getting into the nitty-gritty of the marketing and how fucked up that is. And we're completely off topic.
Yeah, meth's a big problem in Tennessee.
Meth is here as well.
I can't find current rankings. The last one that I see in Tennessee was number 2 or number 49, depending on how you want to look at that. Worst state from meth, but that was a few years ago. But that's our drug of choice here in good old Vol State, meth.
Yeah,
But yes, I promise I'm not trying to avoid talking about this. It's just a lot of this is a tragedy. Any shooting, any mass event, mass murder or anything like this is a tragedy. But the problem is not video games. The problem is not anything that relates to gaming other than the fact that this time it happened at a video game tournament. It all has to do with gun laws and gun violence in the United States,
the
mental
gun
health
in general,
and I got
a train coming.
The health and mental health in the country. That's why it's so easy to get off of this and talk about other things, because it's the other things that actually matter in this discussion, not the video games. And I know everyone listening to this podcast right now knows that, but for so many people who are still, led around by the nose by sensationalist media, and that does go both ways, but in this instance, it's much more conservative media, particularly Fox News, because it always is these days, trying to turn this into anything to draw attention away from
guns,
the 1,001 fires that are burning in our country right now. And in this case in particular, it would be, like you just said, guns.
Yeah, there's going to be
that's why
link in the show notes. This isn't directly from Fox News. This is from, I believe it's Think Progress. They had a article that had the clip in it, so I borrowed their clip. It's an unlisted clip, so it goes to them. Where it's a clip from Fox News and I think it's the state attorney general of Florida, and she goes on this tangent about location services and video games. All right, bitch. This was at a fucking LAN party. You don't need location services to be able to figure out that the person that just beat you is sitting right next to you. But
how does that make you feel?
Unhappy. But it's
I can see that. You seem to be letting out some big thoughts there.
But it's just one of countless examples, particularly in the conservative media for this particular issue, where they twist the subject matter to something completely irrelevant. I mean, is location services be able to find someone through your IP, which is a little bit more vague than they say it is most of the time. And most of the time, whenever the swatting incident that was in, what was it, Oklahoma?
Which one?
The one that the guy got killed in by the trigger happy cop.
Yeah, I think that was Oklahoma. Indiana or Oklahoma.
Yeah, he was a completely innocent victim. He wasn't even playing video games. And the reason why that swatting incident happened was the person that negged out on a bet gave an old address and said, "Oh, well, come get me." So, it's not even location service at that point. It's just twisting the issue, giving some vague things that may or may not be true, and selling fear. And be afraid, sheeple, be afraid. There's video games out there. It's worse than what rap ever was. But that's a subject probably for another day as well, where it's just the older generation and the uninformed being led by the nose. And the sad thing is that the people that are leading them have agendas that are very easy to find if you were to Google them, which I realize Google is an evil thing now because it needs regulation.
Yeah.
Because
we're dipping our toes
deep into some political stuff, but someone was rage Googling themselves and found out that the world hates them. And it just happens to be a giant Oompa Loompa. But
for a bonus episode, we should record a political one-shot podcast and post that up in the feed as a bonus.
Possibly.
Clearly labeled multiple times over politics. Because I know that there are some people that don't like when we talk about politics, and that's fair. We're a video game podcast, not a politics podcast.
Yeah, but in this case, politics and gaming are very closely tied.
Indeed.
Yeah, we should probably do that for after the midterms.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you want to say or add to this?
I wanted to make it very clear the reason why she just leads around and brings up completely nonsensical arguments. She's also happens to be backed by a certain national association.
Do they have to do with rifles?
Perhaps, yeah.
A national riflemen's association?
I would say possibility is strong. But yeah, it's just...
I see.
That's also, once again, getting back into the political side of things. It's just...
Yeah.
Absolutely bonkers, this entire situation, and how it's being completely twisted. And, EA has gone as far as to cancel their other Madden events for the at least recent future, which I can understand why, especially, fear of reprisals and fear of people just going absolutely crazy and wanting to honor the loss of the two victims. Or two fatalities, I should say, because there's more than just two victims here.
Yeah.
It's just... it was not a good gaming news weekend. Let's just put it that way. Which leads us into the other one, doesn't it?
Yep. A Counter-Strike Go YouTuber was killed while driving 100 miles per hour against traffic over the weekend.
Dumb motherfucker. Oh, wait, am I supposed to be Reveling of the Dead?
I mean, honestly, like, on the one hand, any death is a tragedy.
I would say the tragedy here is of the family or families he tore apart, because he hit a car and killed a mother and child. That's the tragedy here.
And then the article says there was one other person in the vehicle who was injured, but it does not say if it was like a father or like another family member or whatever.
Which I completely understand that. I mean, hell, people are trying to dox these people. His fans. Yeah.
But, I mean, on the one hand, it's a tragedy, but on the other hand, God, this guy is a dumbass.
I mean, it just sounds like he's a giant asshole because, okay, before he did this, he was actually at an elementary school ramming the gates. Or did you not see that?
No, I didn't see that. I wonder if he was, like, high or drunk or something. Or having a psychotic break.
It's not listed in this article. I'll have to dig up the Sid Alpha video because he goes more in detail than this article does. Where he was at an elementary school and was trying to essentially get onto the playground. And people tried to stop him. He drove off, and that was a half an hour before the accident. And there's a lot of speculation on why he did this. He was big on both the CSGO skin side and the gambling side. And not too long ago, he had his account trade locked, which lost him over $100,000 worth of CSGO items. And up until that point, he was a very regular YouTuber. Showing off skins, showing off trading sites, showing off gambling sites, which starts to get into the seedy underside of just how CS:GO has turned out. But
yeah, and I mean he was very clearly making.
He bought that car. He bought that car with his profits.
Yeah.
I mean it is
a McLaren 650S. I don't know how much that car's worth, but somewhere north of 150, 200 grand.
Which honestly, if you're a CS:GO YouTuber streamer, buying a supercar for your and he was 18. That's a thing.
Let's see, U.S. dollars. The cheapest version of that car in U.S. dollars is $269,500.
I mean, it just seems like a silly investment to drop that much money onto a car as your first major thing, or possibly your first car, period.
That is the thing, though, about some of these YouTubers. As basically kids who are being handed...
It's the lottery syndrome, almost. Someone that just stumbles into oodles of money and is very unwise with it. And the thing with YouTube is that it's not just a chunk of money or an installment for the next 20 years, depending on how you play it there. It's that you're constantly doing that. You have the fan base, you have people cheering you on, and then Valve pulled the plug on him. And people have been blaming Valve for this, which, if you want to stretch it to the absolute truth or your absolute maximum, they do have some responsibility, but it takes all personal responsibility from this nitwit.
Yeah. I mean, very few things in life for anybody are 100% a person's fault. Yeah. But for things like this, most of the blame lies with the person. Sure, there were some events, and I mean, I tell this to clients too, like, you need to take personal responsibility for the shit that happens in your life. That's the only way to deal with it and to move past it. Like, very shorthand therapy advice right there. Take personal responsibility for your shit. Anyways, this guy had some, basically, good luck, The
SEO gods smiled upon him.
Yeah. But then he also had some bad luck and decisions that some bad luck, some bad decisions that he made on his own part, like where he was following the money, essentially. and it was all taken away from him. And instead of trying to deal with his own problems, either finding a new niche or even finding a new way to keep doing the same thing, whatever went on with this guy, he did some crazy, made some crazy, stupid, bad decisions that got 3 people killed. One of those people himself, but 3 people killed, injured another person pretty badly. And it said in the article that there was, I think it was a 12-car accident. Yeah. So, multiple other people are having to deal with consequences of his actions to varying degrees. They were just people going to work or school or wherever.
And the people blaming Valve for locking his account, they don't lock accounts just randomly like this. He had to be doing something.
Yeah.
Likely tied to his CSGO betting videos. So, yeah, he's not blameless in that either.
Yeah. I mean, I would say this is probably 95% his fault. Maybe even more.
Yeah, I just added the Sid Alpha video for the show notes, by the way. So,
yeah, I'll go back and watch that later.
Sid Alpha gets angry on that one.
I can imagine. 2 people died. One of them a little girl.
Yeah, a 12-year-old.
Yeah. Had her whole life ahead of her.
Just completely senseless. And it does sound like he either was just purely suicidal or had some sort of mental break, because trying to get onto a school ground. And the thing is that there's not been a lot of updates because it's been completely eclipsed by the Madden shooting. So thankfully he's not going to get the recognition that he probably wanted.
Maybe. I don't want to assign that type of motivation to him. I mean, if he had some kind of break, that's one thing. If he was suicidal and he chose to endanger other people while trying to take his own life, that's another thing. But it's a whole other level if he's trying to gain infamy in his death or become some sort of martyr or something. I don't want to attribute that to him, even if that's what he was trying to do. Yeah, I feel kind of the same way.
Yeah, it was a shitty news weekend. And this is the one that you didn't see. And you were wondering why, I was saying it was just a shitty weekend. I mean, a mass shooting is one thing. But having these 2 back-to-back?
Yeah. Not to downplay mass shootings, but...
Yeah, but the thing is that kind of started to get desensitized to him. It's no longer just the shock of a mass shooting. It's another one,
which is terrible. Yeah. The United States is a scary place, guys. I'd say most of you know that, but
yeah, it's kind of fucked up that there has to actually be drills for mass shootings in schools now.
I mean, I had to have those.
I didn't.
We did. I don't remember any in high, or in elementary school, but starting in middle school on, we had them a few times a year in every grade I was in.
Never had them in my schools. The worst there ever was, granted, this was the 90s, was typically after a shooting, and then a couple times randomly, they would bring out the metal detector wand and cause everybody to slowly enter the school as they had to sweep over everyone. But they also it was kind of disingenuous because they turned up the detector on it, the sensitivity on it so much that they were actually catching people that had cigarettes because it would go off because of the foil lining. So it felt more like that they were doing it for that other than gun safety.
Yeah. See, I went to school both pre and post 9/11, and after 9/11, everything changed.
Yeah.
In schools,
pretty quickly.
Well,
I would say the
within
country,
like a year or so.
Not just schools.
Well, yeah, everywhere in the country, but schools was a big one where there were a lot of changes made.
Yeah, and
I remember those first few years. Like, I didn't quite understand why, but I remember those first few years. It was constant drills and checks and things, and then it sort of
became the norm.
Doing air quotes, slacked off to become the normal, and then you just did it like 2 or 3 times a year. But yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty much done with my schooling by then, so I never really encountered that. It's just the country has gone absolutely insane for security theater because a lot of the measures that are taken are reactionary and they're for very particular things, like taking off your shoes, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, something like 95. I think one of the statistics, or I've seen several statistics of this, but, you know, there could be some variance. But something like 95% of all airport security in the United States is actually security theater and doesn't do anything
except inconvenience,
to deter or stop.
Inconvenience and make you feel a little safer.
Yeah, but it doesn't make me feel safer. But that's because I know about it. It just inconveniences me.
But you also get fondled.
I do get fondled. Every time I go through airport security, I get fondled.
And here I thought you would enjoy that.
It's annoying. They don't buy me dinner first. They don't finish. They just do a little fondling, make me wait in line, then send me on the way.
Then you have to go finish yourself.
But yeah, I get fondled every time I go through airport security. Twice, usually. Once because my hair, so they like check my back and stuff, and once because I've got a big penis.
Sir,
so
are you packing?
Check my crotch.
No, I'm just happy to see you.
I'm not joking. They're always like, you've got a little bit of bulge in your crotch there. We're gonna have to check that out. And I used to be like, okay, and now I'm just like, that's my dick. And like all the TSA agents like look at me like I'm a crazy person. But it's like, it happens literally every time I go through airport security. For years now, they've patted down my crotch every time I go through.
Yeah,
that's probably more information than any one of you listening wanted to know.
Unless they were subscribed to Straight as a Pretzel.
Wink.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go ahead.
I just want to add one last thing. Penn Jillette had the idea for airport security, and I wanted to share this one with you. It was called Bacon and a Kiss. This was particularly targeted at the Islamic extremists, where in order to get on an airplane, you had to eat a piece of bacon and kiss someone of the same gender.
Hell yeah. Eating bacon and getting some smooches? I'm down with that.
That'd be a security theater that you would appreciate, huh?
I would definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, but there'd be no time.
Oh, damn it.
But there is something that there will be. Some cultural enlightenment in our next story.
Indeed. Video game music is just as good at introducing classical music for children as a concert, Arts Chief says.
Yeah, this was something that I saw shortly after our previous two stories and thought, yes, a positive story. Yes. But not really surprising whenever you think about it that video game soundtracks, they often lean onto the classical music side of things and into more orchestral side of things. So it's not surprising that it's just as good as an introduction as a concert. Matter of fact, I would say that it's possibly even better because the children are engaged. They're not just sitting there listening to music that they may or may not be interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing something they enjoy, with the backing track being classical music. And I mean, in the article that we got here, it says, you know, that television and movies are up there at the top, but video games are sort of climbing those ranks as more and more people play video games at younger and younger ages. And when we were talking about this earlier, before we put it on the news list, we mentioned, you know, we remember cartoons like Bugs Bunny and things. They have opera, a couple of episodes that were entirely like at the opera, and they've got lots of classical music in them themselves.
Wait.
I think,
do we have to explain who Bugs Bunny is to our younger audience?
I mean, I think everybody knows. My kid knows who Bugs Bunny is.
Yeah, but he's not on TV anymore. He's considered
No.
Looney Tunes are considered not PC enough, or at least some of them are.
I'm trying to think. Has my kid ever actually seen? He's watched Tom and Jerry. He likes Tom and Jerry. I've shown him Bugs Bunny. I don't think he's ever actually watched a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but he knows who Bugs Bunny is.
I think we have a project for the next couple of weeks.
We've recently, when I say we, he's recently discovered Scooby-Doo. We've been watching a lot of Scooby-Doo here lately.
Has he discovered that it's always the second person that they meet?
No, he hasn't figured that out yet.
To be fair, at least the old Scooby-Doo, very limited budget.
I've not seen much newer Scooby-Doo. I mean, I know that they're still actively producing Scooby-Doo cartoons, and I've seen a few now with King, and we watched a couple of movies. Not the live-action movies. Those are trash. They deserve to burn in a fire. But the animated movies, we've watched several of those. But, I mean, there's like a bazillion episodes of the show. So, yeah. I remember watching Scooby-Doo as a kid, so watching the newer Scooby-Doo movies, I'm like, those are not the same voice actors. And King's like, shut up, Daddy, I'm trying to watch the show. There's the crazy dinosaur running around. Anyways. There's some classical music in Scooby-Doo, too.
Yeah. Granted, some of that may just be because it was in the public domain.
Maybe, yeah. But I think video games are a good way to introduce people in general, but also kids, to lots of different cultural ideas and things.
Yeah, especially as gaming starts to branch out into more niche cultures, more or less known cultures. Particularly, I would say the Far East. That's not really highlighted too much in the West.
Yeah.
Things like Jade Empire, for example.
Yeah.
Because that,
a lot of history.
Yeah, that has a lot of history, a lot of mythology for China. Journey to the West, or Odyssey Journey to the West, which is a retelling of the Journey to the West story that's thousands of years, or hundreds of years old now, I think. Or is it thousands? I can't remember the actual age on that.
I'm not sure. Probably hundreds, maybe 1,000, but I don't think it would be thousands.
I'm just quickly looking up. Okay, 16th century. For some reason, I was thinking it was a bit older than that. But okay, hundreds of years old still. It's only hundreds.
Yeah, probably the reason for that, though, is that most Eastern culture is much older than Western culture. Even the oldest European cultures only go back 1,000, 1,500 years, which, I mean, granted, that is a long time, but most Eastern cultures go back thousands of years, all the way back in the Mediterranean to the beginning of recorded history. So, I mean, that's where humanity evolved and then spread out. So, it makes sense that they have the most history and the most cultural stuff to explore.
That in Middle Eastern culture has a lot of untapped culture that really isn't shown in gaming at all.
Yeah. Middle Eastern and Indian. Does India... They don't count as Middle Eastern. They're Asian.
That would technically be... it's India is a subcontinent, so...
Yeah.
But I would say it's usually probably lumped in with Asia.
Yeah.
There was one game I picked up recently that I've been meaning to try out. It's about the colonial times for India. It's a sandbox RPG.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know I linked it to you. It's called Kim.
I'm not recalling it, but I'm sure you have linked it to me. So.
Unfortunately, now the top...
Is it on Steam?
Unfortunately, now the top search for Kim is one of the crappy... not really asset, but low effort indie games. But Kim is a boisterous street urchin in the 1800s or 1880s, and his wanderlust will take him all over India. So,
oh, okay, yeah. I see this.
Granted, it is top down.
I remember this. But yeah, this was just a nice little news topic. Do you have any final thoughts?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of obvious that as gaming borrows more from classical sources and has grander soundtracks and that could be considered classical music, it's obvious that children are going to become more interested in it. I mean, just paging around Amazon Music and finding out some of the gaming soundtracks that's on it and seeing how popular some certain songs are that I wouldn't think. Particularly whenever I start getting into the Final Fantasy music on here. Final Fantasy is a lot of classical music.
Yeah. Orchestral. Very orchestral. Yeah. There's always segments in it that are not, and I think the more modern Final Fantasy games go to a lot more electronica, techno style music, but there's still plenty of classical influence there. I haven't really
played the last couple. I've been meaning to go play 12 and maybe 13. I tried playing 13 but on PC, but it's just it's got problems. It's a crappy port, and my PC is already starting to really show its age, so it was even worse. But I gave it a shot. Yeah, that's what Steam refunds are for.
Indeed.
Which that would be a lovely segue, but we don't have anything about Steam refunds this week.
No, but Microsoft is giving people a shot with their Xbox All Access program, which basically is rent-to-own Xbox consoles.
Yeah, this is what they're calling a limited time right now. This feels very much like a pilot program where you're able to essentially, like I said in the notes and you just said, rent to own Xbox One X or Xbox One S, which, can Microsoft have less confusing naming schemes, please? For a monthly fee with no interest on it. $35 a month for 24 months for the Xbox One X. I had to stop and think about which one it is. Or 22 for the One S. Unfortunately, it's limited to to their physical stores only, and they have a very limited number of their physical stores. That's why I'm saying that it feels a lot like a pilot program to see what the buzz would be for this. But it does open up the possibility of making gaming a lot cheaper to pick up. Gaming is still a very expensive hobby to start, even if you go for consoles, which is the cheaper entry-level stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen Amazon do essentially a pay-as-you-go scheme for computer parts now. There's going to be a lot more, I think, pay-as-you-go, rent-to-own payment plans on offer just in general in gaming as the economy does some weird things. I think is the fair way to say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see this sort of thing happen to most products as the market grows for them and as they become more utility as opposed to luxury. I mean, computers have been utility for a couple of decades at this point, but gaming has still been, I mean, like you said, it's compared to some hobbies, it's not very expensive, but it does have a pretty high upfront cost.
High upfront, but lower upkeep. I think that would be the best way to say it.
Right. But as gaming becomes more and more and more accessible and mainstream, it makes sense that it starts being treated more like certain utilities are. I mean, you think about any appliance that you have in your house, you can purchase in this method. Cars you can, homes you can. About the only thing really that you can't buy this way that I can think of that isn't just, tiny, small sort of purchases is food. But any sort of appliance or, utilitarian object can be purchased this way. And I think it's just interesting to see the potential shifting market as gaming becomes more and more integrated into people's everyday lives. This isn't really a deal. I was calculating just very quickly, the total cost for it, and I'm not sure if there's any markup on it. I understand that they're not doing any interest, but I don't know if there's a markup on it. But the Xbox One X, for example, at $35 a month for 24 months is $840.
That's quite the thing.
The X, I think, is $600. There may or may not be tax factored into this price. Probably not. But I think the X is $600 base price.
Well, the Xbox One S, according to this, is $527.76.
Okay.
That's $21.99 a month for 24 months.
Yeah, I just rounded up to the nearest dollar, but I think the S is only $300.
So there is a markup.
Actually, that's pretty consistent. So, well, Xbox Live is $60 a year, so that's $120 because you get 2 years of that. And then the Game Pass is $10 a month.
Yeah, I didn't account for that.
If you just pay it monthly. So that's another $200.
So it does come out to be a bit cheaper if you include the services.
Yeah. But, okay, so there's probably not a markup. Might actually be a little bit cheaper in that respect. But they're counting on you buying into other things, making money on the other services. Yeah, well,
that's console gaming in general.
The tail of the program.
That's console gaming in general, is that it's essentially the Razer model, where they make money on the blades, on the games, instead of the handle or the console. Granted, that's not quite been true with modern generations, but at least in past generations, they would actually lose money on the console itself to get a larger install base and make their money through licensing, or they would lose money on their first-party games to be, the spectacles, to be able to draw people into the system, to be able to make their money through licensing on second-party and third-party titles.
Right, being a loss leader. But as the price of hardware comes down for them, the manufacturing cost comes down.
They don't want to pass on.
There's been a lot less of that going on.
They don't want to pass on the savings because,
yeah.
There's also the psychology of it that, if something is too cheap, it's considered inferior product. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff in economics in, some courses I've taken and stuff where it's been like, well, we didn't change our product. We just raised the price on it and then people started buying it because they thought it was a higher quality product. And there's stories of that in lots of industries. I'm not sure how many of them are true. That's one of those things that, sounds great for marketing or whatever. But I know that there are definitely some true cases of it. So it could be that. I do know that when the Xbox One and the PS4 launched initially back in 2013, they were selling at cost, which I remember that being a huge deal because there were articles all over the place saying, oh, these are the first consoles that these companies are making that aren't selling at a loss. They're not going to be selling at a profit, but they're not selling at a loss, and that's a huge deal.
Yeah, but of course, as the hardware revisions go through and they streamline their manufacturing process, they start turning a profit a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Because they don't sell at a loss forever. There's a reason why there's revisions of the hardware, even though it's the same console. They cut out features that's no longer needed, like backwards compatibility. Or if you want to go further back, the original PlayStation, it had an I/O port on the back of it that was removed. That was going to be for some utilities and was eventually just used for Game Sharks because
the initial
it was also they just never released anything for it as far as I know. There was some LAN compatibility, but I don't think that was that port. I think it was a different port on it, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, the PS3 had something like that too. When the first PS3 launched, the fat PS3, they had I/O for everything. There was FireWire, multiple USBs. They had multiple HDMIs. I don't remember if it had DisplayPort or not. DisplayPort was either in its infancy or not around back then. I'm not sure when DisplayPort came in to play, but they had like micro HDMI input and just on and on and on. Like the back of that thing has more input outputs than my PC does. But I mean, that was a ton of wasted stuff that most people didn't use, so they cut that out for future revisions of the PS3.
Yeah, but it was great marketing to start with.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. I wonder how it goes. I mean, if this is successful, I wouldn't mind doing something like this to pick up, round out my console library going forward.
Yeah, but
I don't know though. It's
so. Yeah, but you have to go to their physical
so
store. That's the catch, at least right now.
I wonder if there's a Microsoft store near me. Microsoft. There's probably one in like Nashville.
I know my state doesn't have one. So Microsoft physical stores locations. We're sorry that page requested cannot be found.
Tennessee. Oh, there's one in Knoxville and one in Nashville. So I could drive now an hour and a half, 2 hours to the one in Knoxville. I mean, I'm not going to do that, but I could.
I love, I search Microsoft physical store, the fourth link for it. Microsoft tried to clone the Apple Store. It still hasn't worked.
Nice.
Then again, they're offering to different clientele, so. And also, the people that use Microsoft products typically hate Microsoft.
We just use it because we have to.
Because they have DirectX.
Oh, it's not that bad. It's only an hour and 49 minutes away from me. That's too far. I'm not driving that far. But honestly, though, the only things that I would want to play, now that I think about it, on console would be the exclusives.
So Halo?
And I just wait. Whenever the next version comes out, I might buy the last one. I've considered picking up a PS3, because I had an Xbox 360, but I didn't have a PS3, so I missed most of PlayStation's exclusives from the last generation. I could probably get a PS3 for $100, $200 with a bunch of games, or buy games digitally on PSN.
Go hit the yard sales.
PS3. Oh, Jesus. PS3 console with 4 stacks of games, 2 controllers, $150 on eBay. Oh, I could fix a PS3.
Oh, no.
PS3 parts only, $40. Buy it now, free shipping on eBay. If I hadn't just tied up all of my money for stuff like this,
but that's like 2 computers,
those phones, and that laptop. I know. But yeah, it looks like I could get a PS3 on eBay for somewhere between $100 and $150, working with games, controllers. So, I don't know.
I have to admit,
that's a conversational topic for another day. It is a little tempting
at that price point.
Yeah, because I mean, there are good exclusives on every console generation that, I would be interested in playing, and for a low enough buy-in, why not?
So why not
anyways,
move on to Community Corner?
Indeed. Move on over to Community Corner. Do you want to do the secret segment first, or do our...
Yeah, let's get this over with.
Okie dokie.
I'm not sure how I feel about this. If I suddenly disappear...
One of the listeners in our community sent me a message on Steam, as they do, over the weekend while I was sick. Just chatting with me, asking me a couple of questions about stuff. And she was like, hey, you're sick this weekend. You're kind of down. I want to challenge you to do something. No. I was like, okay, what you got? So she was saying, you guys go on ad nauseum about certain topics on the show, things that you don't like. And while I agree with you on a lot of things, there's some things that I'd actually, want you to take a look at before you just completely dismiss them. Love to hear your thoughts on some things. And she gave me a few things, but the one that I chose to start with is... I can't type again. Ghostbusters 2016, the remake. She was like, you guys have complained about that being a bad movie. So I'm not going to tell you my thoughts on it until after you watch it, and then we can talk about it. But I want you to watch it and talk about it on the show, and do one of your little quick movie reviews like you've done before, and share your thoughts with Rage, and then see what he has to say. So, this weekend, among other things, because I did this with a few other things to potentially prepare for future segments related to this, I watched the 2016 Ghostbusters movie. Take my thoughts with 1 or 2 grains of salt. I was sick.
You're high on
taking
drugs.
lots of cold medicine. Although, if anything, that probably would help.
That's not high praise for Ghostbusters 2016.
Ghostbusters 2016 is an interesting movie. It doesn't do anything average or halfway. It's either all or nothing. Overall, this movie is something like a C or a C minus, very average. But at no point in the movie does it feel average. It's either amazing or god-awful. There's some things that it does really right that I was surprised at how much I liked in the movie. For example, I was worried that all of the special effects and some of the liberties they took with the gadgets and things would be terrible and just further contribute to how much I disliked this movie. But actually, I liked a lot of the special effects that they did. Some of the physical comedy gags that they did, where they combined, props and real effects, practical effects, with the special effects, played out really well. Those were some of the funniest moments in the movie, the actual physical comedy that came from interacting with the ghosts. And then when they did the really big battle scene at the end of the movie, that turned out looking really well. I was worried that it was going to turn out terribly, because obviously in the first Ghostbusters, the main, the big confrontation at the end of the movie is zapping the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and then crossing the streams,
Yeah, which they led into really well in the old movie.
They did. But the actual, big battle scene, aside from the fact that I think it went on a little bit too long, was really well done. They used all of the gear in the movie, the Chekhov's gun principle, you show the gun in the first act, and by the third act you need to have used the gun. Every gadget that they showed off in the movie they used, and nothing really felt like it was overused. I like what they did with the little pistols. That was pretty cool. And everything actually made sense. It felt like they actually thought out that part of the movie and used all of the gadgets in a way that they would be used. And they properly built up gadgets throughout the whole movie, testing things multiple times, and they improved as they went. That was something that was done really well in the movie. Now, counterpoint, something that was god-awful in the movie was Melissa McCarthy. I like her in some things, but her style of comedy being super improvisational, it felt like probably 30 or 40% of this movie's dialogue was okay, and Melissa McCarthy, go.
So in other words, she's
and
no
I've seen
Bill
some
Murray.
Outtakes. No, she is not a Bill Murray. She's got sort of one shtick that comes with her comedy routine is vulgar, plus some physical, exaggerated, silly movements. And there are some movies that works in, but when the rest of the cast is infinitely more interesting and funny than you are, it just was not good. So most of the scenes where they're just sitting around talking, if Melissa McCarthy is the focal point of the scene, it is not good. Now, the scenes where they have, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Chris Hemsworth, the guy who plays Thor in the Marvel movies, he's actually incredibly funny. He's a very good comedic actor with a good sense of comedic timing and really good amount or like some good improv training. He's if you don't want to watch this movie but you want to see what I'm talking about, watch Thor Ragnarok. They really let him do a lot of comedy improvisation in that movie, and he's got some real good comedy chops, which they use to the fullest extent in this movie. Now, I've got some problems with his character in the movie and some issues I have with themes in this movie that I'll get to towards the end, but the actual acting and presentation that he does, good. I laughed a lot, although sometimes shamefully so, but again, that has to do with the themes and some other like bigger issues I have with this movie. Probably the other best character in the movie, aside from Chris Hemsworth doing, his kind of dumb comedy shtick, is what is her name? She's on Saturday Night Live. Kate McKinnon. Kate McKinnon's character in this movie is amazing. Every time she's on screen and she gets to have more than, a couple sentences of dialogue, she just steals the scene. Her performance is great. She's got this whole lesbian undertones thing going, but it's not like the new movie never is like, hey, look, we've got a lesbian. We've got we're down with the LGBTQ things. The movie never does that. It just is like, she's got some very longing looks and some, if you're not paying attention or if you don't normally notice that sort of thing, you would completely miss it, but she plays it perfectly. And she's the Egon of the group, and she does that role extremely well. So she gave the movie some bonus points right there. She basically cancels out all of the terribleness that Melissa McCarthy has in the movie. The movie really falls flat with its cameos. There's only one cameo or reference that's any good at all and doesn't just feel like, hey, look, this is that Ghostbusters thing.
I believe the term would be contractual obligation.
Yeah. The only one that's any good at all is the joke about the fire station, because they go to the same fire station and they're going to rent it. And then they find out how much it costs to rent that fire station. And then they make a couple jokes about we can't afford that. And it sounds like it would be really bad, but they actually did a good job pulling it off. And it shows up and it's hey, there's the fire station, but there's a really good reason for why we're just going to show it, and it's funny. I'm trying to think other really major things worth talking about. It's not, aside from Chris Hemsworth and Kate McKinnon and then a few, some of the physical comedy gags, it's really not funny. They try really hard to make it this, 21st century, almost slapstick comedy take on Ghostbusters. And
Ghostbusters wasn't really slapstick. It had its moments, but it's hard to really explain.
Yeah, no, Ghostbusters was an incredibly intelligent movie that had a lot to say.
It's a more intellectual comedy.
And this feels like a really dumb movie playing to the lowest common denominator.
But then they would have moments tell them about the Twinkie.
Yeah. Yeah. But this movie is basically the opposite. It's mostly stupid with the occasional moment of oh yeah, okay. I see what you're doing there. It's a little bit more highbrow. But like I said, the things that it does great, it does great. The things that it does bad, it does awfully.
I will agree, at least what I've seen, that the special effects does look really impressive, especially in the lead up to it. There was a lot of trailers and promos showing the librarian.
Yeah.
And that looked impressive.
Yeah.
But honestly, the special effects from the original, yes, they're campy, but they still are pretty good. But a lot of that was also still physical effects,
Yeah. So yeah, that's the movie itself. Some big, probably it would have landed on a C+ territory before. But then when you take into some of the themes and things running through this movie, this movie is incredibly sexist, both towards men and towards women. They just completely over-sexualize Chris Hemsworth's character, and just make fun of how stupid he is. And I think what they were trying to do was like, see, this is how women were treated in movies, and now that the women are the main characters, we're gonna treat the men this way. And if you do that right, that sort of not really satire, parody maybe, is if you do that sort of parody of something and do it well, you make a point. If you do it badly, you're just doing the thing that you're trying to make fun of, and you come off like an asshole. So not only do they do that, but they also over-sexualize and make fun of a lot of the female aspects in the movie, and do that for the sake of comedy, I think, with Melissa McCarthy's character, but it just comes off bad. Like, they're being sexist both directions. Plus, like I said, the movie is incredibly, like, lowest common denominator, tries to be really, not slapsticky, but definitely a lot of really dumb humor. There's way too many fart and poop jokes in this movie, and none of them are even pulled off well for a little chuckle.
So, in other words, original thoughts on the 2016 Ghostbusters, that it looks like a Saturday Night Live movie based on making fun of the Ghostbusters held true.
Yeah,
but
that's
to be
pretty
fair, the director has been known to make satire movies and not actual comedy movies. So
yeah.
It wasn't exactly a stretch for me to feel that way to begin with.
Yeah. The only other major problem I have with the movie, in terms of themes and stuff, is it
Simon Fegg,
is very
I think, right?
flippant. Yeah, Fegg or Feig. I'm not sure
I
how
just
you
wanted to
pronounce
make
it.
sure.
But, or no, Paul.
Paul Feig.
Paul Feig or Paul Feig. Actually, don't know how you say his last name. But anyways, it treats death and suicide incredibly flippantly. Like,
you'll just come back as a ghost?
Yeah. Yeah, like the main villain kills himself so he can come back as a ghost and take over Chris Hemsworth's character's body.
Dude, spoilers.
Yeah. But it's just like, okay, I'm not comfortable with the way you handled this situation. So, yeah, it's C-. You know, it's not great. It's not terrible. I mean, half the movie is great and half the movie is terrible, roughly.
Okay, as a counterpoint, how about we actually, at some point, look at the real third Ghostbusters movie instead of this abomination?
Okay.
Ghostbusters, the video game.
I was gonna say you're talking about the game,
that
right?
actually is the script for the third movie.
Yeah, which you played on your have a Let's Play.
Well, I wasn't trying to plug it. I was actually going to suggest it for a game club at some point.
We could do that, but I'm totally plugging your YouTube channel.
Gaming with Caffeine Rage.
Ding.
But yeah, granted, it's going to be a little tougher for you to get a hold of if you don't have it already, because it's been pulled for everywhere, because they wanted to shift focus to, this Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I don't think I have it anywhere, so that's...
So piracy?
I guess so. Arr. But anyways, yeah, so that's Ghostbusters 2016. She challenged me to watch a couple of other movies that... Because we go on and on about how bad video game movies are.
I mean, granted, this isn't really a video game movie.
No, but...
Alright, I gotta ask, what movies?
That was... the new Tomb Raider movie is one. I don't remember the other one. I've got them on a list.
I only have Amazon Prime for now. I was going to hold off picking up Netflix until I actually had a television.
I have the new Tomb Raider movie. I could hypothetically, in theory, allegedly, put a copy up for you to get. I haven't ripped it yet, but I can do that.
Well, I'm actually signing up to
I actually brought that from
Amazon
my mom.
Prime.
And I can't remember the other movie she said that I should watch as an example of a good video game movie. Like I said, I've got it written down somewhere.
Probably World of Warcraft.
No, I've seen World of Warcraft before. if you're into Warcraft, it's a great movie, but if you're not, it's incomprehensible. So
please don't tell me it's the Dungeon Siege movie, because I will revolt.
Isn't that an Uwe Boll movie? Yeah.
That's why I was saying, please don't say it's that.
But yeah, no, it's not that. But yeah, that was one of the things. So that's the secret segment, a review of Ghostbusters 2016, and your thoughts on it, which you got out. It's rated at 5.3 on IMDb, which is about where it needs to be rated, like right there in the middle. Maybe a little high, but not so high that I'm going to complain about it. So yeah. I mean, I'm never going to watch it again unless it's just like playing in the background somewhere and I'm at like a party and I literally, like, my phone is dead and everyone at the party, like, I hate them, or they're all like mute and they can't talk to me. Like, that's the only way I'm ever going to watch this movie ever again. But I mean, I don't like regret watching it. I don't wish that I had my 2 hours back or however long it is.
Yeah, but to be fair, you were also off your balls on drugs, so.
Yeah, I was taking a lot of cold medicine. But I mean, like I said, that should have made it better.
Tell what I've been watching. I go to Amazon Prime, and it's recommend me Birth of the Tramp, by Charlie Chaplin story.
Interesting.
Well, this is documentaries that's suggesting to me Jack Lemmon, Cary Grant, Frank Sinatra.
Nice. But so yeah, that was that. Did you like having this little discussion, or did you not like it?
Well, I was browsing Steam, so I think it was just I never was really going to enjoy this movie from the moment I saw the costumes, and it felt Saturday Night Live, and they only did everything to reinforce that.
Yeah. That's fair. That is
they
very
have the Watchmen
fair.
on here. Add that to my watch list.
That is a difficult movie to follow at times.
Well, this is the ultimate cut.
Oh, the one that's like 4 hours long?
3.5.
Yeah.
So is that better or worse?
It's better. I've seen both the theatrical release and I just thought it was the extended cut, but maybe it's the ultimate cut. But it's better. You get a little more time. You get some more things explained to you, but it's still a really weird movie. Although the comic book is extremely weird. Dr. Manhattan is the most broken character of all time in multiple ways, but he's basically God. And he does weird things. But anyways, yeah. Let's move on to our
Well, there's also the director's cut
audio
on here, so,
lists.
There's the ultimate cut and the director's cut. So,
I think I've seen the director's cut.
Not sure what the difference is.
I've seen the theatrical release and the director's cut. Are they both the same length?
Looks like roughly the same length, so maybe 1 or 2 extra scenes.
Okay.
I'm sure it completely explains the story.
Yeah, I don't think anything completely explains the story. I don't think people who've read all of the comics can completely explain the story.
Do you think it's one of those stories and movies that people kind of get, but then just extrapolate on more and more and more to the point where it's kind of its own lore that has nothing to do with the actual source material?
Probably. I mean, very oversimplifying the story. It's what if Superman was more morally gray or ambiguous?
I believe
as
they
opposed
had
to being like
before.
Do what?
In the DC animated universe?
Well, not at the time, because
true.
I believe Watchmen was written much earlier, like the comic, before Superman went through, or before DC went through this phase where they did like their first really like dark comics and stuff like that. And the Watchmen is essentially like, what if DC Comics, but much more morally ambiguous? So you've got essentially like sort of your staples from DC Comics, like Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, like their allegories, but if they were much more morally gray. And you get into all kinds of interesting moral dilemmas. Like I said, Dr. Manhattan is basically God. He is omniscient and omnipotent, and he goes through weird adventures, and I don't know. It's way too complicated to try and explain. We would need an entirely new podcast to work through this.
And how many episodes would you dedicate to Dr. Manhattan's dick?
A few. There's a giant Dr. Manhattan dick in the movie. Because he, like, makes himself giant to do some stuff, and he doesn't wear any clothes because, you know, he's basically God. Like, well, why do I give a shit about clothes? So, yeah. Anyways, letter.
Yeah, the audioless letter.
Text letter.
Does that mean we have to do our Kyle impersonation?
My throat cannot do a Kyle impersonation.
Greetings, J. Arthur and Caffeine Rage. Not even close.
Nope.
But I did try to fix this formatting a little bit because I think he was only hitting enter once. And remember, it's like a zombie. You double tap. I've been super busy having a month out of time of writing, 3 weeks out when this episode is released. From getting married to the lovely Mel's. And I'm having been said, I have some time on my lunch break, and I figured, why not cover a topic that I've been meaning to for a while? Choice in gaming. Now, what I'm talking about isn't the Stanley Parable style of choice where every choice has been predicted and planned for by the programmers ahead of time. I'm talking about legitimate playstyle choices and how developers implement choice in games. As the first example, I'm going to talk about Factorio. And then I fall asleep. I really wanted to give Factorio another shot when it gets its full release myself. That's me talking, not Kyle. In Factorio, you as a player have the option to build your factory in whatever way you want, sort of. While the game was in its earlier access than it is now, the two main options were belt-based factory versus a bit-based factory. Both options were equally viable.
I think that's supposed to be bot.
Yeah, he has a few typos in here, and I'm trying to predict, but I wasn't sure where he was going with bit-based factory. Both options were equally viable for the mid to late game. However, as more got added to the game, developers were able to tweak things. Bots became harder to implement in a timely fashion. Where before the player could just rush the tech to get bots, now they require so much different science to research. The sunk cost fallacy really discouraged players from building up a science factory with belts, then tearing it down, only to build it again with bots. In this way, the devs were able to encourage one style of play over the other. The other game series I wanted to bring up is the Civilization series, specifically 4 through 6. In Civ 3, there are options that were viable. In Civ 4, Beyond the Sword, wide was favored over tall. The cities you placed expanded their territory in a slow but predictable way. And it was basically a requirement to scoop up as much territory as possible so you would not be hurting for strategic and bonus resources. There was also a health system in that game that favored small cities over larger ones. In Civ 5, Brave New World, tall was favored as each luxury research would only benefit 4 cities, regardless of population size. And duplicate resources would not count towards Civ happiness over all, encouraging expansion, war, or trade. Civ 6 seems to be trying to be balanced, luxury resources based on population overall and not city numbers. The main defining bias towards tall versus wide comes from your choice in Civ. Any thoughts yet?
No. So far, so good.
I bring choice in games up because when a dev team does a choice well, you as a player never notices it. However, when devs fuck it up, his words, not mine, usually do something spectacularly that ruins games. To wit, my favorite two whipping boys, Yu-Gi-Oh! And The Surge. The OTP of Horrible? One true pair?
I don't know what OTP is. OTP. I'm an old man.
Let's pass on.
I don't get these acronyms and these emojis.
What was that? Shaking my head.
Yeah.
Let's pass on The Surge. Its cardinal sin is the mismatch of player empowerment versus world design. I have ragged on this in the past, but what it boils down to is this. The combat is meant to be very fast and very combo focused, while the level design seems to be geared towards slow and methodical way forward, where a pause is needed in between encounters. In this way, you could choose whatever weapons and armor you want, but none of them are a good fit for the obstacles of the game. In this, we have the illusion of choice, where none of them are viable. The only way devs could screw this up is heavily favoring one choice to near exclusion of all others. Enter Yu-Gi-Oh! This game is the setup in such a way where the game economy works to offer choice, tall versus wide, a lot of little dudes or one big dude. This falls apart when the combat in the game is considered and the game becomes a game of the biggest number. This is mostly due to the fact that on a turn, monsters in play don't track how much damage they have taken, and no better if you have 5 monsters with 2,900 attack on the field. If your opponent has 1 monster with 3,000 defense or attack power on the field, you're not going to be able to win with that board state. This is a mismatch of how the game is played on one level versus another level. The economy and combat do not agree and destroys the player choice and how to play the game. I've heard it argued that there are several good decks in the game, but time and time again, it's just different flavors of the same strategy and have the biggest number. Was there a point to all this? Not really. Unless you're designing a game, I suppose. There are things that I noticed that due to the fact that I design games from time to time. I haven't published any yet, but I am hopeful that someday I will. And drive me up the wall, and I experience them. Anyway, hope you guys have a wonderful night.
Thanks, Kyle.
Well, it's kind of funny. This was actually brought up in the latest version of RimWorld. RimWorld Beta 19 just released, today. Or technically yesterday now, about 11 minutes. Where they're trying to balance kill boxes. For those who don't know RimWorld and don't want to sit through 300 some episodes on my YouTube channel, Game with Caffeine Rage, by the way. Hey, you gave me a shameless plug, I'll give myself one.
There you go.
There's one main strategy for now. It's called the kill box, where essentially you try to funnel people into this highly defensive area with traps, with gun turrets, and defensive emplacements. Well, this was shaken up by a couple things. One, they included sappers, which are able to, first of all, actively try to avoid kill boxes and try to knock down walls and go through essentially the back door. But also, in the latest update, they've tried to counterbalance this by, one, making gun turns not a set and forget thing. They require an upkeep. So if you wish to have the kill box, you have to have an economy behind it, adding more flavors of turrets, so there's not just one type of turret and a variant on it where it has more health and that's it. They added essentially a sniper turret, which requires a rare resource, but it hits harder. But he actually highlighted the choice of the matter here, where if you wish to have the old style kill box, set up all the traps and everything, The traps as well were changed where they are a one and done thing. Where in the current version that I'm currently running, they're able to essentially be reset over and over again. They're more expensive versus the cheaper ones in the new version. But the idea behind all these changes is either to have a defensive setup where you build an economy behind it and your defenses keep your colonists safe versus a less automatic defensive system, but you have a bigger risk of, somebody taking a bullet to the noggin and bye-bye. I think that's sort of where Kyle is leading with this, where you're given viable options, and the choices and design of the game reinforces that. A cheap setup for traps, new types of armor to have a more viable colonist-driven defensive situation versus an upkeep for automatic turrets that requires both maintenance and the economy behind it to maintain them. I think that's where he's going with this, that sort of choice, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I was talking about this earlier with Monster Hunter, just how much choice and variety to the gameplay that there is. And while there are technically like best or preferred equipment to deal with certain types of monsters, like the game never forces you to do something you don't want to. And that, I mean, that's just one example. There's lots of games I can think of that have good choices.
I would say Warframe could also
games
fall
that
into
have
that, where outside of the extremely high level stuff, most of the weapons in the game, most of the Warframes, which are essentially just player classes, for lack of a better term, are at least on some level viable. Is there min-maxing? Yes. Are there certain guns that are preferred by the community for certain reasons? Either high crit chance, high status chance, or a combination of those. Have a unique effect, have a particular type of damage. Mods that do particular things. Yes, all those are there. But it's more of a choice. But it's also possibly more driven by a more player choice factor, where the majority of the game is player versus environment and co-op, where if you're not min-maxing, if you're taking a gun that you like that is decent enough, sure, you're not going to be top damage, but the community, your group, will carry you if you're in a group.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of game examples of like bad player choice or no
Hearthstone?
false choice, no choice.
It gave Ubisoft, sorry, not Ubisoft, Yu-Gi-Oh! Sorry, I never really watched the anime, and I never played the card game, so Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of odd to me to begin with. I watched a couple of the episodes, but yeah, I enjoy anime, so naturally watch a few anyway. But Hearthstone is another bad example of a card game where it's fallen into the meta, and you only have a few viable decks, and everything else is just the illusion of choice. And there's certain cards that are just I win situations.
Yeah, Hearthstone is definitely a good example. Pretty much any bad card game, any poorly balanced CCG.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the majority of them.
Yeah. Maybe I don't play very many games that have poor examples of choice.
Or we just don't notice them.
Or we're just not noticing them. Maybe because they're not bad enough to be noticed.
Or we're not game designers. I'm an aspiring critic, but usually I'm more focused on gameplay over player choice. I'm actually going to my Steam library, going to my most played games. I would say actually a good example of this would be Team Fortress 2. To some extent. Where, yes, there are hard counters, But the subclass system that they've developed over the years with different character loadouts, not really negates, but gives secondary options. A good example of this would be the Demo Knight versus the Demo Man. For those who've never played Team Fortress 2, Demo Man is a black Scottish Cyclops who, much like Kyle, loves the drink, but his major weakness is up close combat. He has a grenade launcher and he has a sticky bomb launcher. Sticky bomb launcher is typically either used offensively to detonate in the air, essentially in someone's face. Yeah, like you do. Or to set up traps and to lure people in. And the grenade launcher is able to, well, both of his primary weapons are able to deal self-damage. But his grenade launcher is essentially aerial denial as well. And he's very weak up close. He has no real direct damage that's hit scan. Well, the Demo Knight forgoes the sticky bomb launcher, so he loses the ability to set down traps. And he has a shield that increases his damage resistance. And typically he has one of his sword melee weapons, which increases both his melee range, but also his melee damage. And depending on the sword, it could also give him more health if he has particularly the Eyelander. And yes, I did say Eyelander. As he decapitates people, he gains extra health until he dies. So it increases his tankiness to a point. He still has the grenade launcher for indirect fire and for ranged encounters, but it greatly increases his melee capabilities. So I think that's a somewhat decent example of a multiplayer game that has doesn't have the illusion of choice. It has a actual choice system. Granted, certain maps, the Demo Knight is going to be a lot less viable, but it's also a multiplayer game, so there are going to be stupid people out there to begin with.
Yeah, I think one example I have actually was BattleTech at release. As much as I love that game, the initial, one of the biggest complaints I had was that the farther you go in the game, you're driven down this path that you have to get bigger and bigger and bigger mechs. Yep. And for the story missions, that's fine, but the whole rest of the game becomes that. Anything smaller than, say, 70 tons becomes useless. And while they've addressed that in the game, I mean, that was the first mod that I looked for, was a way to change the way that the game calculated, or the variance with which it gave you difficulty of missions, so that other mechs that you had could be viable, because there's a lot of stuff that I like that's smaller, and a lot of strategies that you can.
They had the thing where the evasion system, as you got shot at, you lost evasion points, but that was really how the smaller mechs were able to survive, was they build up evasion pips to make them harder to hit.
Yeah.
And some of the mods made it so that light and medium mechs didn't lose pips, or the evasion system didn't lose them when being fired at, and it required the a secondary skill to counter that. But it wasn't in the base game.
Yeah, it is now. They've taken on a lot of player feedback, and those first couple of mods aren't really needed anymore, due to how much you can vary up that stuff within the gameplay itself. I mean, I guess if you want to take it to the extreme, you still need to mod the files.
Well, they also changed it where originally the main way to capture a mech without getting a lucky headshot was shake it to death.
Yeah.
And it was not viable any other way, really.
Yeah. Just blow it up a bunch of times across a bunch of missions. Just forget that stuff. No, but they've changed up a lot of that to, fix those balancing issues and increase player choice. But initially, yeah, it railroaded you down a specific path, just playing it naturally. And the farther you played the game, the less choice you had.
All right, I have a game that is a good example of both. our current game club,
Okay.
Fallout New Vegas. The base game
Okay.
offers a lot of player choice, not just in the story, choosing what path you want to take, but often the quests are able to be addressed in multiple ways, depending on both your character loadout, your gear, and just what you feel like. Go for a more stealth approach, go in guns blazing. It was all pretty much viable. There were certain situations where it really favored one over the other, but for the most part, I would say that it was fairly balanced. But Dead Money, the DLC that I've played through already, it forces you in a very particular gameplay style, to the point where if you go in with a character that is not built a particular way, you are going to suffer severely, at least in the very beginning. I don't want to give away too much because Jared hasn't played through it yet, but it's a good example of actually both.
Yeah.
You'll see what I mean next week. Trust me, I have words about Dead Money.
Can't wait. Alrighty.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through my list. City Skylines actually has the illusion of choice because of how the traffic AI is. If you don't build a very particular way, the AI is just completely broken. Definitely on highways.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on any others. I mean, I'm sure there's others, but I just am struggling to think of any that... I tend to play a lot of games that are completely open. So, that have multiple ways to accomplish things in general. Just give a lot of player freedom and choice. And the ones that I play, I think, do it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through, see if there's any other really egregious ones. But I'm not, granted, I could scroll for a while.
Indeed you could.
Scroll.
But...
Scroll. Hey, here's one. Loadout. Mostly because the game's dead. You have no choice. Or does that not count?
Sort of.
Actually, Loadout would have been a really good example of illusion of choice, because the game was poorly balanced. For those who never played it, Loadout was a third-person team-based shooter, but the big hook on it was that all the guns were completely customizable and slowly unlocked. So as you build up your character level, you unlocked more and more guns, and you're able to swap them in and out to make custom guns. Sounds like a great opportunity for player choice, but they misbalanced the game. So there was only really a couple really viable options, and most of them were high-level stuff. So once you got to a certain point on the character development, players started using a very particular build around beam weaponry, if I recall correctly. And if you weren't using that and you had it unlocked, you were essentially gimping yourself. Because if I recall correctly, the beam had a soft lock-on mechanic to it. Yeah, which is pretty typical for beam weapons in general. Think of it sort of going back to Ghostbusters. A Ghostbusters like a beam where it would lock on. And the game had a lot of movement on it. So you can see where we're going with this already, huh? So I think that's a good example of illusion of choice on my part, where you were... it's the Yu-Gi-Oh! Example, where you're really being gimped if you're not building to the meta. So I think that's all for that. We did have one tweet that I missed last week that I wanted to at least highlight because I promised I would. It was... Hang on. Just scroll down. It was from Be Cool. He linked a One Angry Gamer video, or not video, but article talking about Doom morally challenged comment has SJWs calling it gross and anti-immigration. Right. Oh. Do you want to take this one? I'm still trying to figure out how it's anti-immigration.
I don't know how it's anti-immigration. I read the article, I watched the trailer or whatever, and I don't get how it's anti-immigration. They're demons from hell. I mean, I don't want them immigrating here. Maybe that's why it's anti-immigration. We don't want demons from hell moving to Earth. Welcome to Earth,
motherfucker.
But yeah, this is just...
it's a joke against the easily offended, and the easily offended was offended.
Yeah. Yeah, they took the bait, ? I don't know, they did their thing and they were easily offended, and it's just dumb. It's a thing that's dumb.
Yeah, the comment was, don't call them demons, call them morally challenged. And it was a hologram in this just ruined area, completely overtaken by the demons. And people flipped the fuck out. So, sometimes I think the internet is both a wonderful and terrible thing to be unleashed on humanity. You know that?
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. It's got its good points. It's got its bad points. I thought the mortally challenged thing was
I thought it was
cute.
A funny joke. I was expecting it to be
it's a funny
really
joke.
cringy, but I watched it was the QuakeCon reveal. It was even the one that they linked. I don't think. Yeah, it wasn't the 25-minute reveal. I saw it was QuakeCon, but what I saw was essentially a stripped down version of it that just had the gameplay segments and a little bit of the developer talk in between.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I'm part of the problem.
No, I don't think so. I think these people are part of the problem.
Yeah, but the problem is that game developers see the outcry and will change their game based on it. Because these people are never going to buy the game. They're not going to play Doom.
No,
I think that's a fair assessment, don't you?
Yeah, they're probably not going to play Doom. And there's a fine line to walk between saying that someone shouldn't be offended at something versus saying, well, this doesn't offend me because I have a different point of view than you. But I think that this is on the line of on the side of the line of why are people offended by this? They're just being overly sensitive.
This is a therapist saying this, by the way. I want to highlight that.
They're playing into a part of culture that, I've heard referred to as outrage culture. They're the people that give genuine social justice warriors have turned them into the meme of SJWs, those people. And for the most part, if something offends you, don't do it. Don't participate in it. Don't engage in it. Because most things are sort of in that middle area where it's this doesn't agree with my sensibilities, but this is certainly not something that I feel like I should try and take it away from you or yours.
Here's the thing. I'm gonna paraphrase an Anita Sarkeesian quote. She was talking about when she discovered feminism, the third wave feminism, and she discovered that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and she had to point them all out. And she essentially alienated herself from her friends. But she didn't take that as a lesson. Yeah. She took that as what she should do with the rest of her life.
Yeah. I mean, there is some truth to that statement. From the right point of view, or the wrong point of view, depending on how you want to look at it, yeah, most things are going to be sexist or racist or offensive in some way. But lots of things really have to be stretched to the extreme to actually be that. Because we just, we're all humans living in the world together, and, we have this idea of what normal is, it varies from culture to culture, but generally, we have an idea of what normal is. And you can still get decently far away from the normal and not be glorifying something that we should take a look at. I don't think that if something is encouraging people to go rape other people or specifically trying to convince people to go murder other people, like, yeah, that's something that we should definitely take a look at. But, you know, making a silly joke, poking fun at someone who gets a little worked up about something, is that potentially a little distasteful? Maybe. But is it something that deserves, like, people getting up in arms about it because it's the end of the world? No, it's not. People have to, like I said earlier, much earlier in the show, people have to own or take responsibility for their actions and their thoughts and how they're going to respond to things. And overreacting to everything, or to things that if you spoke to the general public about, would most likely say, yeah, it's not worth, like, getting that worked up for it. Like, if it bothers you, that's fine, but don't engage with it or whatever. Like, getting worked up to everything that falls into that category does no one any good. It just does disservice to everyone, because it minimizes real issues, and you open yourself up, or these people open themselves up, basically to just more ridicule because they look ridiculous to, air quotes, normal people. So yeah, straight from a therapist. Don't be crazy.
And
own your shit.
but unfortunately, they take
If
the
you're
Bart
not sure,
Simpson approach. Call me a killjoy, but because I don't like this, I don't think anybody should watch it.
yeah, don't do that. If you're not sure, if you think something's on the line, talk to some people about it. Talk to people you
If you
trust.
start seeing eye rolls,
intelligent people.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah, definitely is. That's a pretty good.
And usually, whenever it involves the
measure.
patriarchy as well.
God, we need another podcast to discuss privilege, to discuss white privilege, male privilege, female privilege. There's lots of different privileges that exist, but it's a lot more complicated than just white males suck and everyone else
But you
has been
can't
suffering
be racist for saying
forever.
white males suck.
Yeah, and the group of people that think that
Idiots.
are pretty racist themselves. And yeah, oversimplifying a complex topic at best, and yeah, idiots at worst. But don't send me down that road again. That's bringing up flashbacks of that stupid Twitter argument from, what was it, 3 weeks ago or something?
Something like that.
I don't know.
Do you want
People
to
can be
palate
real
cleanse and
dumb.
do a discovery cube before we dive into your Twitter?
What time? No. We've been going for over 3 hours at this point, and it is almost 1 o'clock, which is
Pumpkin time?
my bedtime. Yeah. So, not this week, but we had a really good one last week. Just go back and check that one out again. But, since we're not doing that, we'll get to the... Well, no, you need to give the Twitter and
Yeah, you're
email
actually giving me a
and the
chance to do
stuff.
that.
Well, I usually do.
The Twitter
yeah, do the
is
thing.
VGL Podcast on the Twitter, and our email is vglpodcast@gmail.com. So part of the podcast where you go first.
Also, indeed, if you want to head over to my YouTube channel, you can search for Gaming Psychologist on the YouTubes. I have got the podcast and our Spin Tires Mudrunner series. The next one, or I guess the last one, will have been part 1 of a map, because, you know, when this comes out, it'll be Friday, and it's Crossing, I believe, part 1, which releases on Wednesday, and Crossing part 2 will be on Saturday.
Yeah, and Crossing part 3.
Yeah, we haven't had any part 3s yet, but we're definitely going to whenever we sit down to record Road Trip again. But anyways, those are on Wednesday and Friday. If you want to follow me, or Wednesday and Saturday, the podcast is on Friday. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so by following me at JMA4707, where I tweet about all kinds of things. Something that I never mentioned is that people are welcome to DM me on Twitter if they'd like.
Oh, you earned that as well?
I mean, there's many methods of communication with which you can interact with me, but if for some reason you want to do that on Twitter, you're more than welcome to do that there as well. If you want to see stuff on Twitch, stuff that occasionally gets posted up using the Twitch Premiere system, or most likely one of our community members who streams. Kyle's been streaming a lot here lately. You can see him. If you don't, for some reason, want to go to his channel, you can watch it over at twitch.tv/jarthur4707. I rebroadcast all of the community Twitch streamers. And you can see his stuff there, or you can just use that as a gateway to find his Twitch channel. Also, if you want to be friends with me on Steam, my username is jarthur4707. I have lovely conversations with lovely people, and hey, one of our community members, which did I ever say her name? It's Amy. Not Amy K from the Kerbal days, a different Amy.
Are we going to have to get name tags and start numbering them? Okay, Amy K is Amy 1. Amy from your old therapist job is Amy 2.
Yeah, well, this would be Amy 3. So, she's just a Steam or a podcast listener who friended me on Steam a couple of weeks ago when we've had a couple of chats. I'm glad that we have some female community members. I mean, I knew we had at least 2. So now we have at least 3. And that's good. I like to have diversity in the audience. But anyways, send me a friend request on Steam, and I will accept it and chat with you.
Did you give your Steam name? Okay.
I did. I said that first. I can give it again. jarthur4707.
If you wish to let them know exactly what episode of the podcast you're coming from, the password for this week is Rutabaga. Rutabaga. I wanted to do something.
Rutabaga?
Rutabaga. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
What do you think?
I don't really
think I just have sensible names or sensible words on here?
Well, lots of times you pick a word that relates to something that's happened in the show.
Yeah, but I don't have to always. Besides, we had stupid last week, so
we did. But yeah,
I didn't want to get in a theme. Besides, I have next week's already set up.
Nice. Well, you do you, boo.
Oh, well, if you wish to catch my content, I'm over at Gaming with Caffeine Rage, still on the YouTubes. I currently have 2 series going. Well, full-time, I should say. I have Spin Tires Bud Runner from my perspective, which sometimes is less interesting, sometimes more, depending on the map.
Indeed. Depends on who's crashing the most at that time.
And I also have, I think I just posted episode 62 of my latest RimWorld series. It's a heavily modded series, so it's not base game. I do the Sunday sampler occasionally, depending on just what I get. I may have to borrow an idea from you and just do Steam Roulette on weeks that I have nothing to do, you know?
Yeah.
And I think Steam Roulette would be very interesting for me because I have a lot of crap. And I don't mean that just in numbers. I mean, I have a lot of just very, very bad games. Oh, I have some real stinkers on there. But let's see. I am going to plug my Twitch. I didn't get to do it last week because I just, I was fighting with Fallout and I was already in a bad mood. So I'm caffeine _rage on the Twitch. I'm planning on doing Oxygen Not Included. But we'll have to see because, you know, I could do other things. I have choices. We'll have to see what's popular. Or, you know, if there's actually people that watch. Which would actually be a new thing for me. Or you can just see me tweet about who knows what on who knows when over at Gaming with CR on the Twitter. And since we did that, once again, I'll plug the VGL Podcast, VGLpodcast@gmail.com, or VGL Podcast on the Twitter. You can send us letters, voicemails, gaming-related topics, questions, or just tweet us articles, and we'll discuss them at least some length, depending on the length and just how late we've gone. It really depends. Our patreon.com/VGL podcast has paid for our Podbean account, vglpodcast.podbean.com, which hosts the RSS feed, our show notes, but you can also catch us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and most other pod aggregators. Our intro and outro music is On the Ground by Kevin MacLeod, and we're going to skip Doobly Doo, but we'll give it credit anyway. By the same artist, Kevin MacLeod. His work can be found at incompetech.com and...
Oh, excuse me. As always, as his lovely music starts to roll across my throat-clearing noise. Well, bye now.
See ya.